Today's episode is brought to you by First Detachment. Are you looking for a supplement brand that truly understands hardworking athletes? Look no further than First Detachment. 1D's real world experience is what I would consider, and they consider, battle tested. I have known Justin Harris for pretty close to 2 decades. And if there's anybody that I trust with nutritional and supplement needs, it's Justin Harris. If you guys have followed me and have followed the podcast, you pretty much already know how I feel about the supplement industry. For me to get behind any brand, I have to trust the brand and I have to trust the person both. And I'm pretty sure you guys all know why. When it comes to creating formulas and putting products on the market, and there's nobody that I trust more than Justin Harris. While I love all of their products, I'd suggest that you check out the Field Rations and WTH first. Go to www.firstdetachment.com and use the code TableTalk10 to save 10% off each order. The link is in the description. You guys are selecting Merrick for your telehealth platform needs. They have a couple different ways that they go about doing this. The first is through a self-selected experience. So there's a Table Talk panel, which is the full panel. That would be the panel that I personally get twice a year. That's checking everything. You name it, it's all there. The other panel is a checkup panel with a guided optimization. You're connected with a patient care coordinator, and the patient care coordinator will meet with you to determine what your needs are, to be able to help optimize your health or mitigate without judgment. So the discount code again is Table Talk Merrick Health for all your hormone optimization and performance needs. Today's episode is brought to you by Element, a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything that you need and nothing that you don't. In other words, no sugar, no artificial coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, and no BS. With Element, I love the watermelon. The watermelon tastes freaking awesome. I drank 1 pack every day, no matter what. People that train out here, it's sitting out here for them all the time. The boxes don't last very long. Right now, Element is offering Table Talk listeners a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 single serving packages free with any Element order. Get yours at drinkelement.com/Table Talk. The deal is only available through the link in the description. The other thing is, if you don't like it, you can just give it away to a salty friend and Element will give you a 100% refund. No risk, money back guarantee. Head over to drinkelement.com/Table Talk.
Today's episode is brought to you by elitefts.com. Founded in 1998 with the primary aim to live, learn, and pass on. Please help Elite FTS support this mission by smashing the like button, leaving a comment, sharing with a friend, and thinking of us for your training needs. If you can put it in a gym bag or load weights on it, Elite FTS has it. What's going on? I'm Dave Tate. We are broadcasting from the middle of the Elite FTS weight room, where the underground still thrives and you're part of the crew. It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. Guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Graciano Rubio. To go through the accolades really quick here, he's known as the Wallstreet Weightlifter on Instagram. Is part of CrossFit Valley View. Is it co-owner, owner?
Co-owner with my wife.
Co-owner with your wife. 105 Pro Strongman, an investment advisor, creator of the 50-to-1 program, husband and fathers. There's a lot of different topics we're going to touch on throughout the day, so I'm going to try to keep it in some type of order, but we're going to go down different roads, I'm sure, as we kind of go through here. Going through your journey and to where you are now in your program, we're going to go deep into the program because there's some things in there that are very interesting to me because they're kind of conjugate, they're kind of not conjugate, but it's still blocked. without you even knowing it, but I'm sure you do, there's a lot of business principles that are in your programming that also carry over to business. That's very fascinating to me. So later on, we will get into business from the macro and micro sense, which is going to be actually a favor to me, because we'll talk about that later when we get there, because a lot of people don't understand basic shit, which I'm sure you're quite aware of when it comes to that. So I'm going to start before your actual specific journey where you grew up around strength with your brothers. That I got, right? So what interested me as I was going through some of the content that you're on is your father migrated to the States because his father was murdered.
Correct.
The part that fascinated me the most about that was he was 14. So what did that journey look like? And granted, I understand 14 in Mexico is different. I'll let you explain that, because you'll do a better job of doing that than I.
Yeah, 14, you have to take a cultural viewpoint of it.
Yeah.
So over there, 14 is not really a kid. 14, at that age, you're a man at that point. So he was kind of considered the man of the family because he was the middle child of 5. His older brother, who was the firstborn, had not a disability, but he had a limitation physically. So he wasn't, fully expected to be like, this is the guy that's going to lead the family. And the secondborn was a female. So she's not going to step into kind of that role. So that weight kind of fell on him. So where they're like dead center Mexico. I mean, they're like middle of nowhere. So there's not a lot of opportunity there. And growing up, if you don't have a father in that area, it's rough. You don't have someone to stand up for you. You don't have someone to kind of play that protector role and provide for the family. It's a rough growing up. So he had decided to go to the States because there was more opportunity. So at 14, it's kind of like, well, you're a man. What are you going to do now? So as soon as he started basically, going through puberty where you could pass as an 18-year-old, and you can't tell the difference, he just got up, hitchhiked from, Durango, Mexico, all the way into the U.S.
What year would that have been, right about?
That would have been 1970.
Okay.
And at that time, I know he had 2 cousins that were in L.A., so he got a hold of them once he came up, and, they gave him just enough to survive there. Like, hey, we got a spot for you to stay. He stayed with them for a bit, and it was immediately like, hey, you got to pull your own weight. So he knows like minimal English, like just enough English to kind of view a street sign and know where to go. So the first thing that they had him do was, they said, hey, we only got 1 car between us. So if we're doing this for you, you got to help us out a little bit. So his job for them was to drive them to work. So he was 14. He's never driven a car before. He didn't have a license. So his very first time driving a car, they're like, hey, you got to do it. So he gets in the car, and I think he's going on Ventura Boulevard in LA. So he gets out, and they just say, hey, you put it in drive, you step on the gas. That's all you need to know. And then hit the brakes to stop. So he drives one to work and then drives the other to work, and then spends his time looking for work. And at that time, it was, there's not the internet.
Yeah.
You show up to a place. So he would go to each business and say, hey, you got anything for me to do? So they taught him enough English to how to ask for work. So he said, I would start in the morning after I dropped those guys off. I'd get there early before, these guys open their shop, and just say, hey, do you have any work for me? And then I'd go to the next one. I'd go to the next one. And he said after a while, he hit up these same businesses over and over again. So his very first job was working for a TV repair shop. And so the guy was basically just said, hey, he's tired of watching me come in and bug him every morning. So he said, all I want you to do is you're going to hold my tools and you're going to hand this to me when I need it.
Yeah.
So he, paid him under the table a couple bucks, but he took that and used every experience as an opportunity to learn so that he could leverage that into doing something a little better. So once you have, some work experience, once you know a little bit more English, then you can do something a little bit more valuable. So he got by for a long time in LA of just, hustling and grinding through that.
What were the policies back then? Because I assume he's undocumented at that time.
It's illegal, but not necessarily enforced.
Okay, so it's just under the table.
Yeah, if you go back to immigration policy, well, to go way back,
yes.
you have a farm worker program from the 40s through the 60s, where all of California was relying on migrant labor, and it was all legal. So you have a huge immigration every single year going back and forth to work the farms, take the money back to Mexico. And the system worked reasonably well. I mean, every program is going to have its problems. But when they passed the new immigration bill, and I think it was 1964, when they passed that new bill, they put a cap on immigration from every single country. So in the 20 years prior to that, you have, I believe, 200 to 400,000 migrants coming into California and working all the farms and then going back. Well, when they put in this new legislation, it's a cap of 20,000 a year. So all the employers in California still need that labor. It's not like, oh, hey, we don't have farms to harvest anymore. So from one year, you got 200,000 people coming in, going back. The next year, those same 200,000 people are going to come. But now 180,000 of them are illegal and 20,000 are legal.
And they're coming and going.
Yes.
Okay.
So when that year changes, it's not like there's this big mass wave of illegal immigration.
Yeah, it's the same people.
It's the same people that were here last year that are here this year. The only thing that changed is the definition.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, from that year, you don't have an illegal immigration problem. You can see the problem differently. You can see it a problem of the federal government not providing the resources that businesses need to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And that really high level federal legislation is too rigid for the variance that you see in different states. California's needs are different than Texas's needs.
Yeah.
It's different than New York's needs. So all that changed is just what the terminology of it,
mm-hmm.
but it's the exact same people.
Yeah.
So when you're talking, late 60s, early 70s, it's all the same people that were coming a few years ago. It's only an issue once it becomes a political issue.
Yes.
So, and in those years, it was, everyone knows that they're, technically illegal, but all the employers are like, hey, we need these people here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't have a business. I don't have all this stuff. So they were illegal, but it was, obviously selectively enforced.
Yes, that's what I was looking for,
So,
is where that fell in that timeline.
Yeah. So I think when he first came, it was not very enforced.
Mm-hmm.
And then once there was some political pressure, from the 60s to the 70s, you have, different parties in power. Then it becomes a political point. So he goes from LA and then starts working in the farms. And eventually, from working in the farms there in California, someone tells him that, hey, they got a bunch of work up in the Northwest. They got all these trees to plant. So then he goes from California all the way up to Washington and starts off planting trees, eventually works his way up, and he's running like large crews of guys planting trees. Well, in Washington, it's a little different than California. So he got deported one time from Washington, and he would joke that they just gave me a free vacation. He's like, I'm gonna be back. So I think it had happened to him in when he was in California, where he said they would deport me. I go hang out for the weekend right across the border, party all weekend. I'm back to work on Monday morning.
Yeah.
So he's like, they just gave me a free bus ride and I partied. I just have the hassle of getting back to work.
Mm-hmm.
But he's like, it's not a big deal. It's easy to come back. They just got to put on a show.
Mm-hmm.
So then when he gets up to Washington, they're not as loose. They target people. If they don't like someone or they want to make a point, they're going to go target that business. Hey, we're going to show up and we're going to perform a raid on these guys just because we can, So at some point he learned enough English that he can, more than just do the minimum. So they raid this place and everyone runs, everyone's like, oh shit. So they take their chances on, I'm going to outrun them. And at the time he said, well, they're going to catch the guys that are running. He said, all the guys with papers are going to sit here and pretend like it's not a big deal. So he said, I just sat and pretended like it wasn't a big deal. And he said, then these guys, which they normally don't do, went and rounded up everyone else and starts asking them questions. So he had this elaborate story concocted of like, oh, I grew up here, such and such. Oh, I was born over here. But he said they asked him like a few too many questions. He's like, I had these prepared answers ready to go of, hey, if they ask me this is what I tell them. If they ask me this is what I say. He's like, I just happened to run into that one guy that was, really wanted to do the job. And he said, my English wasn't good enough to think on the fly. Like I knew what I wanted to say, but I couldn't come up with it quick enough where now my answers didn't start lining up. So he got deported, makes the trip all the way back up to Washington. And then moves from doing trees into construction. And then stayed with construction for the next 40 years or so. So it was kind of a long journey of first coming here, starting with nothing, using, very, very basic skills, very basic education, and consistently leveraging that for something more. So from, hey, I'm carrying this guy's tool bucket, but I have a chance to read. I have a chance to hear English, hear everybody speak, to going onto the farms because there's a larger volume of work so that I have a little bit of money as a cushion, moving up to trees and now managing people, and then going back and starting over kind of in construction back at square one, but with greater skills and with that experience of managing people. So as he moved up, he was already used to managing people. He was already used to managing large crews. So when he started in construction, it was, they gave me all the shittiest things to do. He said the shittiest, worst possible tasks you could do. They offloaded all that on me. And he said I was illegal. So I'm not going to complain. And I'm making good money out here. So I did them. And he's like, but when I learned one, I constantly pushed to level up those skills. And he said, I really took advantage of everyone's laziness. So he said, if some guy comes in, he shows you that he's smart, he shows you that he's hardworking and he's ambitious. This guy's looking at it as, I want to train this guy so he's going to work for me. And then I don't have to do that job. Yeah. He said, but what happens is now I got those skills. Now they don't need you because you were lazy. I learned all of it. So we're the same skill level, but I work harder. So he said, then you go to the next trade. You learn that next set of skills where some guy's lazy, doesn't want to do it anymore. Sweet. This guy wants to do it. Here you go. He said, but I am now more valuable. So he's like, this guy's laziness is working against him because now he's less necessary. And then it's throughout his whole career was always a series of starting off, taking a step up, but kind of being at the shittiest part of that next step. So from a laborer doing the shittiest stuff, moving up to a carpenter, but as a carpenter having the shittiest stuff, the shittiest, laborers to help them, moving up to a foreman and being like, well, we're going to give you the shittiest carpenters and the shittiest laborers to manage. Moving up to a superintendent and saying, hey, we're going to give you the shittiest crew possible. But all of that adversity along the way makes you better. It makes you stronger. It makes it so you have to adapt and you have to learn and you have to figure out ways of doing things that none of these other guys had to do. These guys that had the best crew, he's like, well, you can be a shitty manager because your guys are great. Yeah. He's like, you can do a totally shitty job. You're going to make money. Everything's going to run smoothly. But your skills are weak. Your management ability is weak. You don't understand all these things because you haven't been forced to do it. But if you've been forced to do all the shitty things along the way, he said, now when you get to that point, he said, I can take any of these guys and run a profitable job. He's like, now you give me people that are any good, and we blow everyone else out of the water. So I think later on in his career, you know, he had these series of you know, different steps that he took all the way up through construction. Later on in his career, he was known for being a hard ass. Like, he was known for just being totally ruthless. So there was a job where they're working out of town, and there was a loose joke about people being sent to his job to get fired. Like, hey, if you got a bad attitude, we're going to send you here. He's going to straighten you out. And he doesn't put up with any of that bullshit. So if you pull that stuff on that job, you're either going to change or you're going to be out of there. So they sent all these old guys there. They sent all these old, washed up guys that were total assholes.
Mhm.
So like, they took the asshole of every job. Like, every old asshole went to his job on this one project, and they just fucking crushed it. I mean, they just literally just blew the job out of the water. And all those old assholes, they get along with other assholes.
Mhm.
So his style of just being extremely direct, very clear, very no bullshit, those guys all loved it. They're like, fuck, this is my favorite guy to work for. He doesn't put up with anyone else's bullshit. He tells me exactly what to do. He holds a standard to everyone. So all those old guys were having a great time.
Mhm.
And they joked that they said it's the only construction site you won't hear anyone talk. They said everyone shows up, they know what's supposed to happen, they just get it done, kick ass, move on. They're all experienced, everyone's safe. They said, man, you've never seen a better run job site. And so all of these guys that they thought were like, oh, fuck this guy, we're going to send him out to Graz's job site and see how he likes it. Oh, well, we fucking love it.
Yeah.
So those, you know, being willing to take on, you know, kind of a new challenge, or being willing to go through that shitty phase, you know, leads to greater success over time. You know, it's that ability to kind of to start, be unsure, not know what you're doing, and take the risk that you're going to fail and be shitty at it, that then lets you be good. Because a lot of people aren't willing to go through that shitty phase.
Mhm.
Like, I'm not even gonna start, because when I start, I at least want to be okay.
Yes.
But for most things, there is no starting point that you're going to start at okay.
Mhm.
Most of your starting point is going to be shitty. Like, the first one you do is going to be, it's awful.
Mhm.
And you just get a little better over time. And so that was kind of the, you know, when I look back over that was the single thing that he probably taught me the most was, you know, you have to go through being shitty. Like, you have to have the confidence that you're going to do it. You don't know what you're doing, and it's going to be shitty. And he used to joke, he said, you are never going to work as hard in your life as when you're correcting your own fuck ups. He's like, that is the hardest you will ever work.
Mhm.
You take it on, you fuck it up. And he said, to cover your ass and be like, oh man, this is on me. I did this. He said, you're never going to work as hard. It's like, but you learned, you got better. He's like, you're not going to make that mistake again.
Yeah.
And so he said, now you don't have to worry about that, because now you understand, you know, what you're supposed to do. He's like, but most guys will never know what to do because they won't take that risk that they're going to fuck it up in the first place. They want to start and be good at it.
Mhm.
They want to start and it's easy sailing and they're comfortable and they're already starting, you know, 2 or 3 levels above.
So what point through this did he meet your mom?
That was in Washington. That was later 70s. I don't know if he was still working with trees, or if he already moved to construction. I think it was like right around that transition time. So he was there in the trees. My mom grew up on the Washington coast. And it's all trees and fishing out there. So that's how they ran into each other. She was growing up in this real small town. I don't even know the story how they met. I think they met. I've heard it before, but I forget about it. His cousin was dating her best friend. So they were introduced to each other because mutual acquaintances. And, you're talking the 70s and you're talking small town.
Mm-hmm.
People are more practical about relationships. People are more practical about life. So in that era, it's not necessarily like an arranged marriage, but you're thinking like, hey, I don't want to be in this small town. Like, what am I going to do when I become an adult, when I become 18? Am I going to live here my whole life? So he was this, I don't know how good his English was, but this really smart, really hardworking immigrant guy. And he was a bit flashy. So driving around in a Trans Am and bell-bottom pants and giant pork chop sideburns and shit. So, there's some peacocking going along with it. So it's like, well, if you're looking at someone, you look at where someone is, you also look at the trajectory.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at that trajectory of like, oh, this guy came here, he's been here for probably, I forgot how many years, probably at least 7 or 8 years at that point. Now he's at this point, like, what does that look like 30, 40, 50 years from now? So if he went from, starting at literally nothing to here, like, well, put that out another couple decades. That's a good bet to take. If you're gonna put your future in someone's hands, that's a pretty good bet. This other guy that he's kind of just, he might be here at this point. Well, he's been there his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
When we look 20 years from now, he's probably going to be at that same point. So they met. They got married right after my mom turned 18. Then they left her small town. They lived in some middle of nowhere place in Washington. They lived a few places. Still working construction, doing stuff like that. And then they moved down when my brother and my sister were they were kids. They're like 6 and 7 or somewhere along there. They moved down to Salem, Oregon. And when they moved there, they moved into this brand new trailer park, totally new in the Mexican part of town, because that was about 15, maybe 20 minutes from the main office of the construction company he worked for. So a lot of the guys lived in Salem because that's right off of I-5, and then you can get to any job site. So they moved there, and the place was totally brand new. So you had a bunch of people that were kind of in a similar situation as them. When you think of a trailer park, you're thinking of some like rundown shithole. But a lot of those started out pretty nice.
No, they start out
like
they start out new, right?
They're all new. When they came in, they had a big community pool. They had nice basketball courts. They had all the amenities.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom grew up. She was one. Her parents got divorced, got remarried. She was one of 7 kids living in a house, and it was a nice house. Her dad worked for the electrical company there. So they lived pretty well, but there's 7 kids, a lot of mouths to feed,
mm-hmm.
and there's not a lot of space, and you got to share everything. My dad came from nothing. So to both of them, they're like, hey, this is sweet. This is a great deal. And you had a lot of other people that were the same way, that were, starting off from zero. This is one step along the way. And it was cool. Good people. At first, well maintained. Everything was really good. I think 4 years after they moved there, I was born. So that's where I lived for my first 6 years of my life. And eventually they moved to Kaiser, Oregon. And Kaiser was kind of like the place to raise kids at that time. They were in this unique situation where, everyone wants to move to Kaiser because they got better schools, they got better everything. And they're real particular about their zip code. they make a clear distinction because the cities, border each other. So everyone calls it, basically the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But anyone from Kaiser, like, no, I'm from Kaiser. I'm not from Salem. So they found a spot there. We moved when I was 6. And I remember going to the house. And there was a real old guy that lived there. His wife died. It's too big of a house. But this was a huge upgrade from where we were. They had a huge backyard. They got fruit trees in the back. I was going to have my own bedroom for the first time. And they had this huge hot tub. It was like a 10-person hot tub for one guy. So they had this huge hot tub that took up like half the patio. Actually, it took up more than that. Actually, they built onto the patio. So the patio at the time, this is like 2/3 of the patio,
Mm-hmm.
this giant hot tub right there. So I think our first night there, we're sitting in it, and I'm 6, So I asked they love telling the story. I asked my parents, so when do we go home? And like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, we got to go home at some point. Like, how long are we going to stay here? And they all start laughing. They're like, well, no, we are home. Like, this is where we live now. But at 6, like, I couldn't comprehend it. Like, well, I don't, what are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
This isn't where we live. We live over there. Because the place was so much nicer that it was like, there must be a vacation or some like other thing. Like, we don't live here. Like, I didn't comprehend in my head at the time, like, how do you go from living there to living here? And my siblings were already in their later teens, so they weren't there that much longer. They moved out. But it took me years to like fully understand that, like that upward mobility, that ability to improve, that ability to get better. But that was planted at a very young age. Like, no, this is what happens if you work hard. This is what happens when you do the right things. Like, you get these rewards. So at 6, I didn't get it.
Yeah.
But as soon as I could, comprehend it, I got it. Like the soonest age, it was like understandable. It was like, oh, I've already had that for 3 or 4 years.
Did you know that when you started playing sports, say in junior high school and high school?
Yeah, I would say so. I was lucky in Kaiser. I was incredibly lucky to have coaches that were phenomenal coaches. I didn't realize how good they were at the time. It's not until you work with a really shitty coach that, or you move away and you hear other people's experiences, that you realize how lucky you are. So growing up, part of the reason why people want to move to Kaiser is because you have all these other families that are helping out as well. So there's always dads available to coach teams. So I had played, a few different sports, and youth sports that 25 years ago was not youth sports today.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a fan of youth sports today. The way the stuff, now that I got to get my kids doing it, they're just totally crazy. They're over the top.
Yeah.
But at that time, I think the first like organized sports, like 2nd grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really remember much of it, but I remember 3rd grade was my first year playing football. You can play flag football. And that was the dad that was the coach. I'm trying to think the order of 3rd and 4th grade. They're a family that I continued to, they stayed in Kaiser, my whole growing up. So these are guys that I ran into frequently later on. Awesome guys.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was the Van Cleve family, and they had 3 boys. The oldest was my age, and they were just an outstanding role model for the community. And obviously their kid plays on the team. So, there's some self-interest there where, I'm going to help out because my son's on the team. But they did a really good job. And one of the things that I'm really fortunate for is that all of these dads stepped in to chew my ass all the time. Like, and not in a way of like berating, but in a way of you can be better. Like, wherever that was good, but you have so much more potential that level of effort's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I had that in 3rd grade. I had it in 4th grade, and it was Rich Austrie, he's a FBI agent. And his son is the most pretty boy Hawaiian you've ever seen in your life. Like he is Mr. Surfer Kid. So growing up, he was like a Hawaiian Justin Bieber. So his kids' attitude are like a total 180 of his dad. His dad is like real straight laced, total ass chewer. And that would have been 9 years old. And man, he would rip into me nonstop. But he would do it from a point of, hey, you can be better than this. And then the next year, the coach, his son played on the team. His son wasn't very good, but he was the quarterback.
That kind of can hurt, though.
Yeah. But in 5th grade, so 5th grade is my first year playing tackle. And in tackle football, they break it down to heavyweights and lightweights. And I was a fat 5th grader. So I had to play with the heavyweights. But I'm also a little young for my grade because I got a summer birthday. So I'm like the youngest 5th grader. And some of those guys are the oldest 7th graders. So there's almost a 3-year gap in there. And that gap in that age, you're talking pre-puberty to potentially like 2 years into puberty. So I got the shit kicked out of me. Like, and I held my own. I didn't really get my ass kicked. But I certainly wasn't doing well. But no one really gave me too much of an ass kicking. And then 6th grade, we got this guy, Larry Smith, in Kaiser, in Monmouth, Oregon, because he went to Western Oregon University, and then in Coos Bay. This guy's a total legend. This is where a lot of things that I tried to implement in my own coaching come from. And not that the other guys were bad, but those guys, you understood, they're kids on the team. That's why he's here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Larry at the time was in his early 50s. And this guy was a stud defensive end at Western Oregon. He runs a successful lumber company. He grew up in Coos Bay. And Larry had 3 daughters. So this guy who's like 51 or so, he's just out here to help us out. And I remember thinking like, well, that's weird. He's only doing it to help, that specific age of boys in the community transition to men. Those guys, when they're the most impressionable, when they start doing dumb shit, because that puberty kicks in, you get a little testosterone flowing, and now they're doing all kinds of dumb shit. He's there to set them on the right path. And so he's not getting paid to be here. His time's obviously valuable. He's just here as, hey, I want to help you guys get better. I want you guys to take what you learn here and apply it to the rest of your life. And I remember the first day of practice, because this has got to be early thousands. So we're talking probably 2002. And in 2002, you got to understand that Cadillac Escalades are not what they are today. When Escalades first came out, you only had like rappers and ballers and drug dealers driving them.
Yeah.
Especially in Oregon, because in Oregon, people don't value their cars the way they value them in other places. Like there's a collective mentality of being pro-environment, not being very wasteful. There's kind of that shared attitude. So to drive around a big luxury SUV was already weird.
Mm-hmm.
But the only time you saw an Escalade, it's like a rapper just drove one. This is way before soccer moms took him over.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy rolls in, brand new Cadillac Escalade. License plate says Big Lar right up. He pulls up right up to the gate, front spot. Guy gets out. He licks his cigars. So not quite Coach O from LSU, but it's rough. And gets out. He's about 5'10", like 230. And the guy's a brick shit house. For a guy in his 50s, you're like, Jesus Christ, what is it that I've been doing his whole life? He looked like all he's done his whole life is log trees. That's how he wakes up, spends his time cutting trees down and hauling them out of the forest. And I remember looking at his hands, and he had these bricks of hands, just these monstrous, thick, calloused hands. And we go to practice, and he was the biggest ass chewer. I never had a coach that would chew more ass than this guy. But it was also very clear that he cared about you. And at some point, I had thought, like, this guy, why is he here? Like, he didn't have a kid on the team. Like, he's really just here to help us out. And I never forgot that moment of like, man, this guy's really doing it just like altruistically. So throughout that whole time, he would rip you apart purely for effort. Never on what you did, never on the outcome, never on, hey, this didn't go the way that we planned. He would chew you out for not paying attention. He'd chew you out for not giving your full effort. He would chew you out because it's the fourth time that he told you not to do that. So his rule was it's 100% effort, whistle to whistle. He had a rule of, if you jump off sides, if you go 100% and blow that guy through the field goal posts, I'm okay with that. We'll take our 5 yards, and when that guy lines up at the next one, he knows you're going to kick his ass. Mm-hmm. But if you stutter, you give us 5 yards, and you don't take your free shot that we earned, he would tear you apart. And he said, it's because if you're really giving 100%, you should be off that ball so quick you hit him and blow him off the line. But if you just give a little stutter step, you're hesitant. You're doubting yourself. You're not thinking about it. So he said, if you're so locked in that you just can't contain it and you jump off and crush them, we'll live with that. So he used to grab you by the face mask. And then, this is a big guy. He'd grab you by the face mask and yell at you. But at no point did it ever feel like an ass chewing. No, at no point was it like this guy's belittling or this guy is trying to make you feel bad. It was always from a point of, hey, you can be better than this. You can do it better. You can go harder. You're not reaching your potential. And so at some point in 6th grade, puberty had just started for me. So it's kind of a big year. Like, I got this guy here that I'm learning from, and maybe a couple months earlier, I start going through puberty. And I run into a guy, Alex Fox. And Alex Fox, we all knew him because he was an absolute stud. Well, he was in 7th because he's a year older than me. So he's about a year and a half older than me. He's without a doubt the strongest kid in the whole league. And we're doing some stupid drill. And we line up. I'm like, oh, fuck, dude, I got to go against this guy. Like, all right. I have it in my head. All right. At least not getting my ass kicked. Like, if I'm going to take this ass whooping, I'm going to at least make him earn it. So we line up, and I go 100%. And I lose. But I didn't get my ass kicked. It was a good fight. He clearly beat me. He's clearly better right now. But afterwards, I thought, man, if Alex Fox can't kick my ass, no one's ever going to kick my ass. Because last year I was getting my ass kicked. Yeah. Last year it was like, oh man, I can't cut it with these guys. I'm too short. I'm too fat. I'm too slow. And then just a little bit of puberty. It was, I'm going against the guy, which is undeniably the biggest, strongest dude, and not getting my ass kicked. So I said, oh, fuck, dude. Never do I have to worry about getting my ass kicked. Then after that, that was kind of like the first little jolt of confidence of like, hey, you can play against these guys that are older and have more experience with you. And then I have a coach that's in my face nonstop, pushing me for more effort. And so at the end of the year, it was just a total transformation. And you can look at the pictures in there. Like you can look at my 5th grade football picture and my 6th grade picture, and like that's not the same kid. Like it literally doesn't look like the same person in that span of 1 year, because 1 year of puberty right there, you're like, there's completely different. But what was more important is the mental transformation of, I was kind of shy, unsure of myself. And now it was, I'm confident walking around and being in practice and doing all these things. And that matters far more going forward than just the fact that, hey, I can physically do these things. And so Larry was the first time I had a coach for 2 years in a row. So 7th grade, I kind of had the option of like, hey, what do you want to do? You could either play for the middle school team, or you can play for Boys and Girls Club again, because I was right at the weight limit. So they're like, hey, you can drink some water, you're going to weigh half a pound over, and you can go play middle school, or you can do Boys and Girls Club. But I wanted to play for Larry. It wasn't, I wanted to play for the middle school, but I wanted to play for Larry more. So I came back a second year. And then that second year, it was Larry had to hold me back in practice. And he was like, hey, look, you need to understand something. Some of these kids aren't as strong as you. Some of them, your 100% are going to get these kids hurt. So you need to be a leader. You need to give them a workout. And, I'm not asking you to sandbag, but you need to make sure that they give their 100%, but you don't crush them to the point that they just want to go home and they don't want to come back. You got to build these other guys up. So a full year of just nonstop, push. And then the next year was like, hey, you got to show some restraint. Because like 5 minutes ago, I just tore someone a new one. Just like, it's a practice.
Yeah.
And he said, hey, you got to help these guys out. So he said, win, make it look good. Don't totally sandbag and be patronizing and act like a jerk about it and play around. But don't come in here and just kick the shit out of people just because you can. Because some of these guys, your half-assed effort, you're still going to kick the shit out of them. You got to help them out so that they believe they can do it, that they get better, that they go down that same path. So that was my first opportunity of any kind of leadership, which was, hey, help these guys out too. It's not just about you on the team. It's also about these other guys. And then when I finished playing for Larry, I go to 8th grade and I run into a guy, Emmanuel McGladry. And he's a wild character. So this guy at the time, when I met him, he's about 6'4", 240. Well, this guy went to Willamette University. He was a star tight end. And now he's in his 40s. At 240 pounds, the guy used to run marathons. And quit running marathons because he blew his knees up doing it. He said, it's just too stressful. And so he said, before I really, run myself into the ground, I got to stop doing this. So he switched to distance biking. So on the weekends, he'd be like, oh yeah, I went for a 100-mile bike ride, when school let out on Friday. We rode our bike all Friday night, camped, rode it all Saturday, camped, came back down Sunday night. We got here. I'm back at school on Monday. So I had actually met him through choir. So I had signed up for a choir class, and then we go to play football. And this guy who physically was just, intimidating, 6'4", 240-pound guy is a giant guy. You kind of lose some perspective when you're used to strength sports where you see all these huge people all the time.
Yeah.
But around normal people, that guy's a monster. So he was the school's football coach. He was the school's wrestling coach. and he was their choir director. And then he used to conduct an adult choir at the church. He was a very religious guy. And so he had this kind of balance to him, that on one end, he was just an absolute savage. But then he's turning around teaching, 12-year-olds how to sing. So when we go to practice, he kind of laid out a series of principles that always stuck with me. So every single day, all the linemen would do just footwork. And that's every practice. Footwork over and over, the same 5 drills over and over and over and over again. And was very clear about being crisp. I don't want sloppiness. I don't want you guys out here. I'm not going to run you guys ragged. You show up, you have full focus, you do it right, you get better, and you move on. You recover, you come back and do it again. And it wasn't until years later when I actually read all the research and all the stuff on deliberate practice that I realized, there's a whole mountain of research about how to do that stuff. But at that time, his motto was, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. If you guys are practicing like shit, you're going to perform like shit. And if you're practicing perfectly, that's how you're going to perform when the time comes. So he said, I want you guys performing in practice to the best of your ability. And you can only do that so long. If I keep you guys out here forever, you're not going to be able to perform at that level. So you perform at that level for as long as you can. You don't perform as long as you can at whatever level you can sustain for that period of time. So when we went to practice, everyone's fired up. Everyone's going 100% speed. We're all focused. He was very clear in his communication. This is what we're going to do. This is when it ends. And he was an outstanding coach just from all the principles that he taught. And he said something, which was, we were getting ready for the biggest game that we ever had. So you have 2 middle schools in town of about 1,000 people each that funnel into a high school of 2,000 people. Well, we're getting ready for the game. And up until this point, he's been Mr. Church Guy, all the time. Mr. Church Guy, Mr. Fundamentals, Mr. Nice Guy all the time.
Yeah, I see where this is going.
One of those guys where you're just like, is this guy that perfect? Is he that, much of a stand-up guy? He's like a notch under Tebow, where you're like, damn, dude, it's too much. So he said, I want you guys to remember that we're just out here to have fun. That's what matters at the end of the day. But I've never had fun losing. And that's how we ended the practice before. And we were so fired up at that point because he never said anything like that. It's always, all these life lessons and all this stuff. And he was like, no, we're there to win. And I had seen a little bit of it because he had that same attitude when we practiced in choir. So those schools, both in middle school and in high school, their choir program was very competitive. It wasn't like we're just out here because we don't want to do other classes. It was you had people coming from Claggett Creek that were taught by this guy that treated choir like a sport. And we used to do things in choir that are so fundamental to strength sports, but I didn't comprehend it at the time. So we would start choir practice the same way we'd start football practice, which is the fundamentals. We would practice our breathing. We would go through basic drills. We would go through posture. We would go through all of these little elements. And he used to recruit people back and forth. So he would get the football players and other athletes into choir, and he would tell them, look, you already know how to use your body. You already know these things. I can get you to sing pretty quickly. And it's going to help you at your sport. Which, it did. I didn't believe it at the time. I'm like, whatever. I'm here because the hot chicks do choir.
Yeah.
I don't want to do another elective. The other electives are boring. I like music. I'll give it a try. But I stuck with it because he was the director. And I remember, years down the road when breathwork became a thing, and I would talk to people previous, like, things that relate to breathwork and all those different aspects. I'm like, damn, we got to teach people how to breathe. I'm like, what kind of shit are they selling? Like, what? We're at a point where you guys are selling courses. Oh, hey, I'm going to teach you how to breathe.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the hell? I thought at the time, I was like, man, the whole fitness industry is like at a new low.
Mm-hmm.
Shit, they're teaching people how to breathe. And I started thinking about it, and I thought, I said, well, where did I learn how to breathe? I was like, well, you know what? Actually, I've gone through all this breathwork training before. Like, all these breathwork drills are stuff that it seems advanced and it seems like this next level stuff in fitness, but you go into another domain and that's basic shit. Mm-hmm. That's the basic fundamentals. That's the stuff they're going to teach you on date one. So then I thought, yeah, that's not fair, because I only think it's boring and it's don't even think about it, because I started learning that at 12 or actually 11. Like at 11, I started practicing all that stuff and didn't really realize it for what it was. And so it was making me a better athlete. It was improving all those things. I just thought of it as normal because I continued to inquire for all the way through high school and thought, hey, this is just how you breathe. There's no thought or anything to it. Then when I started working with adults, I thought, oh shit, I got to teach them how to breathe. I was like, these people don't know how to breathe.
Yeah.
So I had that like all through middle school. Like my football coaches that were outside the school that helped me as an athlete. Musical training, which a lot of musical training is physical. I mean, we were talking about some of the most fundamental aspects just of the body, how to breathe, of what your first order of survival is you need air. That's first. If you're missing something, that's the first thing that's going to kill you. So breathing is like the most fundamental skill you can master. And I didn't comprehend at the time that I was doing that. And so, 8th grade rolls around, and now I'm working with the same guy in all these different realms. So he was my choir director, he was the football coach, and he was the wrestling coach. And so he's incorporating like these random elements, these random things that we're learning in different areas into a whole program. So you're taking what you learn in music and then you're getting onto the wrestling mat. And when you're getting choked out, you're comfortable. Like, oh yeah, I know how much air I got left. Mm-hmm. I know, hey, this is fine. I'm used to being at this point of not having a lot of air. So when you do something like choir, you're frequently going to run out of air. Most people up until that point, they've never experienced that before. So when you're on a mat, the only experience you have with not having a full breath is when you wrestle. Mm-hmm. But you have that feeling all the time. So when you're deep into a mat or deep into a match and you're tired and you're dragging ass or someone's choking you out and you can't breathe, you've been here before. And you're not just here on the mat in those few times that you're losing. You're here regularly. So this experience isn't setting you off. You're, stay calm and you stay cool, you stay collected. All of those things transfer to one another. And so he was the one that kind of opened my eyes to say, hey, you should have a wide variety of things because it's going to help you connect the dots. You're going to take what you learn here and apply it here, even if you don't recognize it at the time, or even if it doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. You learn something in this domain, and then as you're progressing in another, you hit a roadblock, you have that experience to draw on to say, oh, this is what's going to solve that next problem.
Do you think he knew that at the time, though? Or it was just coincidental that he was doing it?
He knew most of it. So between, during 7th grade, he brought in a new choir director, someone that he had worked with as a teenager. And this was another guy that competitively did choir. He went to a college on a music scholarship, and he was even taller. So now we got this guy 6'4", 240, leading, what at the time we were known for having a huge men's group, because all the other schools try to get a bunch of middle school boys to do choir.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. But we would show up and they're like, what the hell happened? Because not only does he have the most guys, he's got all the athletes.
Yeah.
All the athletes were doing choir. So when we pull up, it looked like it was a track meet, or it looks like it's the football team getting off the bus. So he was explaining to him, when he was doing his student teaching, all these little tricks throughout class. And this is something that I used once I started coaching CrossFit. He was breaking down all the things that he does intentionally, that he said to the untrained eye, you don't see it. But he was talking about using the piano and using the space and using different pieces of equipment, using different pitches when he talks. He's saying, look, one of the traps that choir directors get into is they sit behind the piano, they do everything from one spot, and mentally they can't make the switch. They don't know what you're talking about. They don't know what you're expecting of them. So he said, when you're losing control of the group, when the group's not engaged, he said, you can't just sit behind this piano and talk. And he starts pointing to spots in the class. He said, look, that spot right there. He said, this is my discipline spot. So he said, when everyone's goofing off, they know that when I come to this spot right here, it's time to be quiet. And this is where I chastise people from, because it's the same every time. So they know right when I start walking there, they know what's going to happen. And then he starts explaining the way that he gives praise. And he starts explaining that, he uses different pitches when he talks, so that more context of the message than just the words. He said most of that is not purely the words, it's all the context that it's in. So he said, when I do, this specific thing, I'm going to use a little bit higher pitch. When I do this, I'm using a little bit lower pitch than my regular speaking voice. And he said, when I go to this spot here, this is what I do. So he never broke that down as part of practice, but he broke it down when he taught the new director what to do. And he said, these are the little elements that add up over the course of this year and gets these guys to that top performance. So he said, I'm not in here, willy-nilly. Every single thing that I do is thought out ahead of time. So he had like 4 or 5 different things that he was explaining. And that's something that as soon as I started coaching other people, looked back on with some extra help, different books on communication, different books on doing that type of stuff. But some of it, he probably didn't realize, just how much was incorporated. And then some of it was clearly intentional. Some of it was very thought out ahead of time of, I want, this response from the group, and thinking about how am I going to get there. So for the choir, it was all thought out. It was every element was planned.
Now, so right about that time is when strength and conditioning came into fold, right? So around junior high, 13 or 14.
Yeah,
How did that? Because now I understand where I heard before that, strength was not foreign to you because everybody around you was already strong. This kind of fills in that gap real quick. So how did that come into the fold?
I was 12. I was about to turn 12. And I asked my parents for my birthday. I said, the only thing I want is a gym membership. That's it. Nothing else. Don't buy me anything else. I don't want it. That's it. So at 12, I would go to the gym with my dad on the weekends. But at 12, I could get by, without looking. And I go back, to that story that my dad told me. He said, hey, you blend in, you pretend like you're supposed to be there, and no one's going to question it. So when I was 12, I'd go to the gym and I'd say, hey, if I just work out and I don't look stupid, no one's going to question that I shouldn't be there, that I'm not old enough. So he would take me and he would go to the pool, go to the sauna, go do different stuff. And I just acted like I was supposed to be there. So no one questioned it. And I dicked around the whole time. I mean, all the dumbest shit you can imagine. But I was 12.
Yeah.
And at 12, you're going to get stronger no matter what you did. So I was, banging out on the pec deck, banging out on the calf raise, banging out all the stupid shit you could possibly do. But it didn't matter because it was fun. And so somewhere along the way, that was 6th grade. 7th grade, I had to do a science project. And you had to do a system of the body. And so I said, well, shit, I'm taking the muscular system. So at that time, people didn't understand the internet fully. They didn't comprehend, the full power of the internet. So and there wasn't the resources that there are today. So I think I was 12, because I think this was early in the year. So I was 12. I had been working out for maybe a couple months. And I go, well, where am I going to find, I need pictures and I need stuff on the muscular system. And I go, well, what about bodybuilding.com? Like, that's got to be a website. So I type in the browser and I put bodybuilding.com, see what pops up. And I go, oh shit. Like, oh, this is like the resource. So I find bodybuilding.com and I see all the guys that are in all the muscle magazines, and then start looking at, the articles. And as a kid with unchecked access to the internet, I just go down the rabbit hole of bodybuilding.com at like 12. I don't think I was 13 yet. And I just start reading article after article. And by that point, I was a big reader. My mom reads a lot. So my mom used to buy me books all the time. Her one thing that she would never push back on, anytime I asked for books, she would always be like, hey, here you go. Like, no questions asked. All the, typical kid shit, give me the hardest time over. But I knew every time I asked for a book, here you go. So I had this huge book collection, and then I run into, that's like my first real use of the internet, it's bodybuilding.com. And now I'm not limited by a book. They got a shitload of stuff. They got an unlimited amount, more than you could ever possibly go through. So I start learning about the muscular system, and I'm looking at more, encyclopedic, content. But I use some stuff from bodybuilding.com for pictures and whatnot. And once that project is done, I have kind of a rough understanding of, the muscular system, muscles and tendons and all that. And it was the first, one of the first projects that I was actually excited to do. So, I over searched it and had more of kind of a, not just fundamental, more of like an educational, like a deeper background on the basics and basic function. And then once it was over, it was like, oh, there's I got all this other shit of actually how to train. So I start going through bodybuilding.com, and I would wait till my parents go to sleep. So my dad would go to sleep at 8 p.m. no matter what. Just 8 p.m. hits, in bed, I got to go to sleep. My mom would normally go to bed a bit later. She's normally in bed by 9. So I knew at 9:10, hey, they're both going to be asleep. I can sneak out of here and jump on the computer. And I'd keep all the lights and stuff off, make sure I don't make any noise. And I'd spend hours reading. I mean, I would read until I fell asleep. So I'd spend 2-3 hours every single night reading shit on bodybuilding.com. And it was from all the legends, and there's some bullshit in there. But you start putting it together, and you start building this really good bullshit detector. And this is something that for some reason people have lost. But at the time, you're like, when someone says something that's kind of counter to what what, most people agree on. Okay, well, where's this guy's results? Oh, I'm not listening to that shit. Come on.
Yeah.
You're telling me you know more than all these guys that are twice as jacked as you? Come on, get out of here. So you build this, right there is where I first started like a really good bullshit detector and understanding like who should I learn from? Who are the phonies? And that was my first introduction to a lot of the guys that are prominent today. Because back then there was a little bit of gatekeeping. The internet didn't work like it works today. The internet today, you could be a total no one in the middle of nowhere. You start putting stuff out there and you can totally take over. You can become bigger than anyone else. Back then, it took a certain amount of resources in order to just have the database, the servers, the website, all that stuff. They didn't have the video content. You didn't have the equipment to do it. The writing's a lot harder skill than talking. They don't have the auto captions and all that other stuff. So when you put something on the internet, it costed you something. It costed you a lot more than it costs today. So those bullshit artists weren't as prominent. And a site like bodybuilding.com, I mean, any of those things are going to have some trade-offs, but you had some gatekeeping where the total bullshitters couldn't get in. And the good guys, you got to see it was always like a subtle endorsement. If someone was on that page, it was a subtle endorsement of that person. So that was my first introduction to you and Louis Simmons. That was my first introduction to Christian Thibodeau. I think it was my first introduction to Jim Wendler. Those guys were all on bodybuilding.com because you had to promote each other. So because you're not getting like, just whatever you push or whatever you publish pushed out to all these people, you're going to go to a handful of couple sites. And you want to build off of each other's audience and go back and forth. So all the stuff from Elite FTS is also on bodybuilding.com, where they have a similar article that they maybe put it slightly differently.
Yeah.
So they're all cross-promoting each other. So you kind of have like a little bit of a syndicate. So I would spend hours and hours and hours and hours. Then take all this stuff, then have my handful of favorite authors. Like, oh, these are the guys that I agree the most with, because I'm also in the gym doing a little bit. And some of the stuff just intuitively makes sense. Some of the guys are just so jacked that I'm going to listen to what I'm going to at least want to know their explanation of stuff. And then kind of branched out from there. So from bodybuilding.com, I learned about T-Nation. From T-Nation, I learned about Elite FTS. Then you start learning about, the Strongman forums. This is where people go for this. This is where people go for this. And now you have a whole new list of people that you're learning from. And you're whittling that, you're kind of, open to new ideas, but whittling it down of like, okay, these are the people I consider the authority. These are the people that I'm going to listen to in terms of what to do. So I keep dicking around for a while at the gym, and then in the meantime, I'm reading every single day, 2-3 hours, starting with bodybuilding.com. Eventually, I've read basically almost everything you can read on there that's of value. I'm years back.
Oh yeah.
Move on to T-Nation, devour everything that you can get out of it. And I wasn't, advanced enough to start looking at some of the other sites because some of the stuff didn't make sense to me. I didn't have the experience. So the summer before high school, I'm not quite 14. And the only reason I wasn't going to the gym every day is I had no way of getting there. So summer comes up, I'm going to turn 14. And I start bugging my mom. I said, hey, can I ride the city bus to go to the gym? And she's like, no, not doing that. So I go, well, when Dad was 14, he was hitchhiking from Mexico to come all the way to the U.S. And I'm just asking to go on a city bus, a few miles away. So she pushed back for a little bit. I wore her down. My dad had no argument. He's like, he's got a good point. What am I supposed to say to that? So that summer, I just keep bugging my mom. And she's like, fine, when you turn 14, you can ride the city bus. And so from that day forward, I never missed a day in the gym again. It was, hey, I got a way to get there. It's the summer. I don't have shit to do. So every day I would get on the city bus, go out to the gym, train. And over 15, you needed parental.
Probably, yeah.
You needed parental
for a signature or something.
No, they had to be with you if you were over 15. But I was 14, and I said, "Hey, I'm just gonna act like I belong.
Mm-hmm.
Walk in, check in, walk right past, act like nothing's up."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, they're not even gonna go check the details. The sign-in comes in, it pops up with your info. I said they're just gonna look. It's gonna say green, and you're good. But if I'm walking around, all nervous, all skittish about it, they might, stop for that little half second and be like, oh, you can't be here. So I would ride the city bus to go to the gym. And that's where I really started training, because now I could actually follow a program. I could have like clear progression. I got all day to be in the gym. So I started doing, as I got a little better, I had to learn more to keep progressing. At first you do whatever. Yeah. But when I first started really training, I already had, a good year and a half of knowing a lot of shit, but having never put it into action. So I start training, and then as I got better, I start going to more specific sources where T-Nation will give you a blend of a bunch of stuff. But then if I got to solve this problem that's more related to powerlifting, Elite FTS has this whole section of shit of someone's already laid out exactly how to solve that problem in the next 5 problems you're going to run into. And I that's where I kind of started developing my own style to it. And it was really that I read from so many different kinds of people that I wanted to take what worked, what all these guys were doing similar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If it's all similar among all the guys that are strong and jacked, that's an absolute. I have to do those things.
It's a clue.
All this other stuff where people disagree and they don't see eye to eye on, well, this is up for debate. This is something that, it might be application specific. It might be context specific. This stuff is where, it's up for debate. And I'm going to have to figure out, what do I do in that space? Because this other shit's non-negotiable.
Yeah.
They all do it. There's no way around it. This other stuff was
either bullshit or contextual.
Yeah. And those differences are what's going to set apart the champions. So I knew right away, like, hey, I still tell people, you should have a coach. You should do all those things. But early on, I realized, like, hey, at some point in the future, it might be 2 years, it might be 5 years or 10 years. There's not really going to be someone to help me out. Like, there's going to be a point where there is no one to help me out anymore, because I might be solving problems that they haven't seen before, whether that's related to me or whether it's related to something I'm trying to do. This problem hasn't been solved. So every step along the way, I wanted to understand the why. Like, why are they doing it this way? Why are they doing this way? Because down the road, I'm going to have that knowledge when I come up to something unknown of how do I solve that for myself? And in the first 5 years, none of it mattered. None of it mattered. Like, there was nothing I did that I would ever run into a problem which someone hasn't already ran into and has a solution for. It wasn't until, 10 years later where now it starts to become hey, these other people can't help you out. They don't have the experience in that very specific realm to be able to give good advice. They're going to be guessing the same way that you're guessing. And now it's just, who's more believable. And on one hand, you know yourself better than anyone else. On the other hand, you might not know yourself at all because you can't be objective. You're only seeing it from your perspective, and someone else can look at it in an objective sense and give you better advice. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be that guy that solves the problem, but you have the potential to solve it better than anyone else. Because if you objectively look at yourself all the time throughout that whole training process, you're talking 10 years.
Yeah.
You have the ability to understand yourself more than anyone else. But people tell them stories and they aren't willing to be honest with themselves. And in that instance, you got to recognize that, which you're not going to because you don't have the self-awareness in the first place, or otherwise you wouldn't be at that point to say, hey, I need someone's help on this new problem. This new problem that no one has seen before, I need to hand that off to someone.
Yes.
Or, hey.
But you need to know how to vet that someone too, because if they haven't, one of the most important things that you said is, early on you were able to decipher what was the bullshit pretty quick.
Yeah.
Because if you read 1,000 articles, you're going to find commonalities.
Yeah.
Then there's going to be ones that are like, oh, that's weird. And then you can figure that out. Because what you're saying there is if you go to somebody as a mentor or coach or an advisor or whatever it is, they have to have that basic knowledge too. And they have to not be so caught up in their own bias that they're just going to say, oh, here's the answer.
Yeah.
Without, you see, so there has to have that common educational belief in what works. Because there are a lot of, I guess, charlatans, I don't know what to really call it, that think that they could answer that problem that you may have that hasn't been seen before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's when you're talking about it like at the highest levels.
Yeah.
And this is where my real gripe about people that talk about being science-based comes in at. If you're really going to have some type of scientific standard to it, well, the sample has to be representative of the population that you're going to apply this to. So at these top levels, the population's only 10 guys.
Yeah, it could be one.
So how are you possibly going to have some study that's going to explain how you go from this point to this point when the whole population that you're working with is 10 people? At the beginner level, you can have a study of any number of people. Even at the intermediate level, it's going to be expensive. It's going to be difficult, but you can have a high quality study on intermediates. But as you get up there, better and better and better and better, the relevant population is so small, you're not going to have any study that's going to justify those methods at the very, very top. It's not going to happen. Just from a pure logistics standpoint, there's only 10 people at that level. Now, even of those 10,
they don't want to be studied.
Yeah. If you're those guys, if you tell them, hey, we have this idea for something that works, but 5 of you are going to get it and 5 of you aren't going to get it, they're going to tell you to go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
No. Tell me what it is. Tell me how it works. Tell me why it works. And I'm going to take it and I'll let you know how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not going to give my competition a leg up on me and then give me a sugar pill or some other bullshit intervention that I'm the control. No one at that level is going to be the control.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're talking about those elite guys, they don't walk around year round in that kind of shape all the time. So there might be 10 guys like that, but there's not 10 guys like that all the time. Maybe only 2 of them are that strong at that time. And another 4 of them are that strong, 3 months later. They have off seasons. They take a little bit of a break. They're not just walking around at that very peak elite level year round nonstop. So now you're talking, we only have 2 people to study. Well, okay, there's 2 people. There's so much variance in those 2 people. You're not going to be able to give an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew that kind of, early of, hey, when I get to that point, if you really want to be the best at something, you're going to have to make those decisions without all the information, without knowing exactly what it's going to be. And you're going to have to take those chances that, hey, I had the idea based on, all of this experience of myself, based on all, the fundamentals, the theory, everyone else's experience. This is my best guess. And that's why, throughout the whole process, I wanted to learn, because I knew that point would come.
Mm-hmm.
And people have broken it down into, you need a study for every last little detail of it without even understanding like what those studies are telling you.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because, the best guys are going to use both. The right approach is both. But if you had to pick one, I'm going to go with this dumb meathead that has done it, that has helped all these other people do it, over this study. It's your probabilities are better off with this guy.
Oh yeah.
They just are.
I think history shows that though, because if you go into any gym, any CrossFit across the board, most people in there are not doing science-based shit.
Well, science out of necessity, if you have a model, like, hey, you do this program, you get these results. It's simplified by necessity. You can't capture every single factor involved.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at just the exercise portion, you have to look at the sleep portion. You got to look at the food portion. You got to look at the lifestyle management and the stress portion. You got to look at all these other aspects that when you have a model for how something works, which is what your study is. Your study, gives you this model of do this, you get these results. By necessity, it's simplified. The question is whether the stuff that you leave out is relevant or how much of a difference it makes. The guys that have walked that path and learned this stuff through experience, they understand how much those other factors matter. They understand, hey, that's not really a big deal, or this is a big deal. They understand, extrapolation. So, hey, that'll work really well to get you from beginner to intermediate or intermediate to advanced. But hey, at this point, you're not putting, 5 pounds on your bench every month. That what you're doing there changes.
Mm-hmm.
So those meatheads, they understand all those little contextual pieces. They have a deeper understanding of the model. So if your study captures, 90% of what's relevant, the meathead understands that 90%, but they also understand the 10%, which that model can't account for. You can't account for, someone's sleep, because it's going to vary quite a bit. And when it comes down to actually doing those workouts, there's times that you sleep 8+ hours and you feel great, and you start training and the weight is twice as heavy as what it normally is. And you're like, what the hell happened? There's times that everything goes to shit and you're unstoppable when you show up at the gym. Well, that wasn't supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to feel great after this, and I was supposed to feel like shit after this, but the reverse happened. And having someone that has done that before and understands those little things helps you out quite a bit. Whereas if you're stiff in this rigid ideology of like, oh, I do this and I get these results. The human body is not the machine you think it is. It's way too complex to break it down that simply, of just these exercises, these sets, these reps get these results.
Mm-hmm.
Can't be done. But it'll give you a good starting point.
So if we go back to when you were, because you have all these coaching influences, and I can see a lot where this 50-1 kind of comes from, to be honest, just by what you've already said without you even really explaining it that much. And you fell into Dan John, which you related to a little bit more than everybody else because of the sports aspect, but also the simplicity aspect of the movements that you have. So you found the rep charts, right?
Yeah.
So that's, and there were multiple rep charts at the time. So first question would be, how did you decide on which ones to use?
Oh, I averaged them. So
yeah, I should have known.
Earlier on, this is kind of this is like right when I started training. You know, I'm looking at all these guys' programs, and the single thing that sticks out is an increase in relative intensity. So, and I started doing, you know, really the basis of the 50-to-1 program was when I was 14. Like, this is what I've done from practically day one. Within that like first week, you know, hey, I did this weight for this rep. So what does that mean for a 1 rep max? So I use 300 when I explain it to people because it's a simple number to understand and it works out. If you do 300 pounds for 10 reps, it's supposed to be a 400-pound max. And there's a handful of different charts, and then they all agree on this, like the same numbers. They agree at 80, basically at 90%, at 85%, and 75%. Now they'll get them in a little bit different ways, but 75% for 10 is like where every single different study they've done intersects. So okay, we'll accept 75% for 10. And then there's some slight variation for your 5 rep max and your 3 rep max. So when you look at them, and you can tell, if you go to Wikipedia, they graph it out for you. So you can tell that, hey, this one drops off way too much. It's too steep. This one is kind of too flat. But they intersect at basically 90% for a triple, 85% for a set of 5, 75% for a set of 10. So I looked at it as, when I do 300 for 10, you know, that's a 1 rep max of 400. Well, how do I know if I put more weight on the bar, if it actually got harder? You know, if I do 310 for 9, is that harder or is it easier? Well, you don't know. It's 1 less rep, but there's 10 more pounds on it. But if we take that and we give it an estimated 1 rep max, which would be 402, that was harder. So if week 1, I do 300 for 10, and I have an estimated 1 rep max of 400, and week 2, I do 310 for 9, I got a 1 rep max of 402, I can look at those two things and say, hey, that's harder. Week 2 was harder. If I go up to, you know, 320 for 8, it's the same thing. Hey, that got harder. That's a 404 or something like that. So when you look at those rep maxes, you can look at it and say, hey, that was more difficult. Where a lot of times in a program, you have your typical, I'm going to get in shape, I'm going to do some volume, I'm going to go start getting heavy. And along that path, you don't have an actual way to know, hey, was this harder or was it not? So I went down in reps, I went up in weight, but I'm actually not training as hard as I was 4 weeks ago. So I wanted a way to say, hey, when I start going down in reps and start going up in weight, I want to definitively know, hey, that got harder. And so early on at probably age, you know, first week of training, you know, I get on the internet, look up, oh, what does that mean for a 1 rep max? And then after looking, you know, for years through all these guys' programs and how they do it, I said, well, what if every week I just go up a tiny bit and add a pound a week of progression, or 2 pounds a week, you know, depending on how I feel? Would that work? Well, all these guys say it would work. That's literally the whole essence of their program is, hey, have a higher intensity. Don't just do more shit. It has to be harder. And if you understand the body from, you know, a physiology standpoint of understanding homeostasis, you need that stimulus. You need that challenge, which is above what you're currently adapted to. So I said, well, if I get to something harder, I'll get stronger. And then I'll fill the rest of my time with some other shit. You know, I want to make sure I don't have any imbalances. Want to get a pump, might do some cardio, all that other stuff. But the meat and potatoes is this week, in order to give my body a stimulus, I need to get to a higher level of intensity than it was previously. And early on, because I'm relatively untrained and I'm young, that can happen on a pretty frequent basis. I can do that every week. And part of it is also that since my whole family works in construction, that relationship between volume and intensity was largely built through understanding people in construction. So if you take your favorite fitness influencer, whoever they are, there's guys on construction sites all across the world that is doing a higher volume of work than they are every single day. They show up Monday through Friday. If you were to quantify how much total work they did, it would be more than your favorite influencer. So why aren't they that strong? Why aren't they that jacked? Well, there's no progression. The skill saw is always going to weigh the same amount. All of those tools are going to weigh the same amount. You don't have 50-pound bags of cement and then 60 pounds and 70 pounds. They're always 50 pounds because they're doing the same shit. Even if it's really hard, they'll get strong and they'll get in good shape. But once their body has adapted to that, it stays in that same level of shape. Whoever you're following online, that person has progression. They are going to go up next week and they're not going to do as much work as the guy working on a construction site, but the intensity is going to progress. They're going to do a harder set of squats. They're going to do a harder set of bench. There's going to be progression in the intensity. So right there, my guiding principle was it's not the volume that's going to get you better. It's the intensity. You need some volume to be in shape, and you need some volume to handle the recovery from that. And there's other aspects. The volume will help you build muscle. It's going to help your technique. It's going to help a lot of these things. But at the end of the day, it's the intensity aspect. You're going to have to put some weight on the bar, or you're going to have to grind out that last rep you really don't want to do.
So how are you defining intensity? As a percentage of a 1 rep max or the actual effort you're putting in it?
I'm defining it from that score standpoint. So if I flip that, all of the repetition work, your work between 75 to about 90%, I'm judging all of that repetition work purely out of the score. So if I do there's a 5 rep set that, or there's an 8 rep set where it wasn't that hard. And then there's a 5 rep set that'll totally kill you. And I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, if I did 400 this week and I did 402 next week, that's an increase in intensity.
So you're looking at what that progression would be
Correct.
At the very end. Okay, got it.
So I view all of that work from that score standpoint.
Yeah.
So 300 for 10, then 310 for 9, then 320 for 8. When I look at that as an estimated 1 rep max, it's going up.
Okay, I get it. Yeah, I get it.
Which is only for the repetition work.
Sure.
Once you get beyond 90%, you're not really, your training switches more to the nervous system. When you're up at 95%, it's not going to be the same thing because you get under 95%, which should technically be, a weight you can double. And if you've never done any work up in those ranges, you get crushed.
Yeah. There's skill to it.
You're just not there. So it's easy to track those weights above 90% because your volume is so low that it's very easy to say, hey, this workout was harder than this workout.
All right. Then how would you progress that intensity over time?
Early on, I would only work in that 70 to 90% range. And that was because so many guys had said, hey, the bulk of your work should be in that range. The bulk of what you do should be, and I bumped it up 5% because I was less advanced, but all the, big studies out of Russia and whatnot, they said, hey, our elite lifters all do the bulk of the work from 70 to 85%. So, well, they're elite guys. They're using heavier weights. They can't recover as quickly. So I take that, I go up a little higher. For a guy that's not nearly as strong, it should be 75 to 90%. So all I had to do was stick in that, build from 75, over the course of a few weeks, build, go down in reps, up in weight.
Got it.
Getting to, let's say a max triple. Then when I go back to, let's say a set of 10, I'm still trying to increase that weight. So if I do a max triple and it tells me, hey, your estimated max is 420, when I go back down to, let's say a set of 10, I want 421. And you get a little bit of a blend of, training some of the nervous system. 90% is not quite heavy enough to really get into that range, but it's enough for someone that's really focused on managing fatigue, for someone that doesn't intend to, step on the platform soon to compete. Well, at some point, my 10 rep is going to be higher than what my max is already. So you'll get a small stimulus of the nervous system, but that small stimulus is fine if your goal is years away. You don't need to be hitting those near max weights to prime yourself to compete on the platform. You can slowly get that stimulus over time. So something like a heavy triple, you'll have, you kind of make a transition. It's not like a black or white, like I'm training the muscles or I'm training the nervous system. You're training both, just at different degrees. So the whole point of going down in reps is partially, to get the nervous system ready. But then at some point, you're going to go back to the 10 reps. And as you build up, you'll get that stimulus over time.
Well, each one of those become indicators as well, correct?
Yeah. So, if you're going back to 10, like my former 5 rep max might be my new 10 rep max. And so when I'm looking at that, it's like, well, technically you're not stronger. You just did more reps. Well, you're stronger. And if you go out there, you're going to have a bigger max. It's not like, oh, I got to the same weight and I just got totally crushed. No, you were still receiving some stimulus to get the nervous system and get that primed. But I'm staying out of that upper end range most of the time, because everything that I had read up until that point was basically you're training near your max when you're peaking and you're getting ready for competition. But the stuff that long term is making you stronger is all of that rep work. So I would throw in some singles here and there just as a test and just as a way to get a little extra out of it. So if at the time my max is 400, I might do 1 rep at 95%. I might throw in a couple singles before that top set, just as a way to test, just as a way to get a little bit extra stimulus of the nervous system so that my body's prepared for those heavier weights. But those reps are so fatiguing that you're not getting as much reward out of them, because a workout, beyond 90%, you're only going to get a few reps and the workout's over.
Yeah.
But in those lower ranges, I get way more work. So for a guy that is early on in his training journey, my skill's not that good. I haven't put on nearly as much muscle as I can really carry. I haven't done all these other things that I also need to work on. So those high end singles and doubles, they're a trade-off of these other qualities that I know I also need to develop. And so the only reason I really wasn't doing like more near max work was that I got what I have to give up was more valuable.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason. And that's switched over time. Later down the road, it's, hey, this rep work is no issue. A lot of my time is in this near max area because you're getting the brain ready to hit a new PR. So that's one of those things that's normally context dependent. And that's kind of the overlap of looking at everyone else's stuff, of saying, hey, this is what all these guys do. This is a slight twist to it, but this is where the bulk of it is. And the stuff I add on should be based on my specific application. So that's what I did for the first 4 years of training, is essentially building up to 1 max rep set, adding in some other stuff depending on what I need to get better at. Well, 4 years go by. I think I turn 18. And then the original 531 article comes out. So 531 comes out, and I'm looking at it. I buy the ebook. And that method kind of evolved over the course of 4 years. It's not exactly how it started out. At that point of 4 years, I understand all the nuance. I understand all the little things. I'm looking at it and I go, holy shit, this looks just like what I do. Like this is, 90% of the same stuff. Like all the principles that Wendler laid out was like, yeah, if your rep max goes up, you're stronger. Don't give me that,
Yeah.
And he lays it out in that way of like, don't tell me this bullshit. Like, oh, you did, you went from 225 for 6 to 225 for 9. You're stronger.
Yeah.
Like cut all the semantics and all the stuff. So he lays it out in a very like clear way of like, these are the principles of the program. And when I start reading, I'm like, fuck yeah, dude, that's all the stuff that I believe in. And then I look through and it looks really close. He explains, the warm up. Hey, don't go in there and fuck off and do all this other stuff. I'm like, yeah, dude, I don't get it either. So we're looking through all this stuff and he kind of lays out the program as, now at my age, I'm not competing anymore. I'm a little beat up. I'm not going to be a volume warrior. It's the intensity that matters. This is my program that I use to maintain strength and to also be athletic and healthy. And if I was to, kind of redo it, I never would have abandoned these principles. I never would have strayed away from this. I just would have been more patient.
Yeah.
You're still going to get strong on this program, forever, but you're going to be patient. And a lot of times you're chasing your tail by you gain too much weight, you get too fat, you think you got way stronger, but if you come full circle and you take all the fat off, you're like, oh, well, shit, I would have been a little stronger had I very slowly gained weight. If instead of gaining 50 pounds and losing 40, I would have been stronger if I had just very slowly gained 10 pounds. So if you take everything full circle, a program like 531 that is a little more encompassing, and everyone loves to gloss over the part that he tells you not to be fat and to do your conditioning and to do all your other stuff. They just see the cool part, which is like, hey, you're going to build up to a max rep set.
And the AMRAP.
Yeah. And ignore the, hey, don't be fat, go put a vest on and run up a hill. So he lays the whole thing out. And, I had spent 4 years training in a very similar fashion. And this is not to say that, hey, I made, the same thing on my own.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at the ebook. He lays out that same formula. He said, hey, when you walk into the gym, you should have a plan of what you're going to do. You should walk in, say, hey, I want to hit 8 reps or I want to hit this. And he says, one of the techniques that you can use is you can estimate the max of that set. So here's the formula. Here's the formula to use. If you want to say, hey, I want to be a 600-pound deadlifter, well, you don't have to go in and pull 600 because you're going to be wrecked for a week if that's your max. Instead, you can pull, an 8 rep max. So figure out what an 8 rep max is. And now with that in your head, you're going to approach that AMRAP set with a much different mentality. You're going to attack that set and push, for those extra 2 reps, knowing in your head that, hey, that's the equivalent of a 600-pound deadlift. And so, I'm reading the book like, fuck, dude, that was my thought. That's thought the exact same thing. Like, hey, why go beat the shit out of myself on this 1 rep max when everyone tells you not to do it? But if I know that, hey, 8 reps of this leads to that, you attack it a lot differently. So when I'm looking through it, he writes it essentially, you can't build a timeline and go back to give yourself all that information and say, hey, don't do this stupid shit. Don't do this stuff, stick to this. But you can do that for another guy. And so when he put out that article to help the next guy, I was that guy that's reading it and saying, this isn't going to radically change what I do because there's already so much overlap. There's tiny differences between the two. But what it is going to do it's going to save me from doing a lot of dumb shit. Because now, say, hey, if Jim Wendler, this is how Jim Wendler trains, and it looks, really close to what I'm doing. If that's what he comes back after all these years of training and says, hey, this is what you should do, well, I'm going to stick to it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go try all these other things because this guy is coming in and saying, hey, all that other stuff is bullshit. It's not worth your time. Stick to it and be patient.
So it validated you're on the right path.
Yeah, it validated everything that I had done and tried to incorporate into training, and saved me from doing a lot of dumb shit. And then on top of that, as I learned, because I was really only doing the major lifts at that point. Hadn't started strongman training, I hadn't done any weightlifting. But at that point, it was like, well, if I can figure this shit out on my own and be, within the realm of how Jim Wendler trains for this specific purpose, I can tackle these other things too. I don't need someone to hold my hand the entire way and guide me through the whole process because I've already been through this. So he saved me from doing dumb shit. And then he also gave me the confidence, like, hey, you can go tackle this new realm or this new area of sports on your own. You'll be able to figure it out. So he's probably the biggest influence. You could call it influence, or the better word would be impact. And it was just from that moment right there. And again, back in those days, it's not like you were making, you weren't making Liver King money back in 2009. You were putting that stuff out there. Maybe someone works with you one-on-one or they buy your book, but you're doing it just to help the next guy along and for him to take the torch and run with it. So that was a big moment. And then ever since then, it was kind of like, hey, I've always felt like an obligation of all along the way, these guys, put that information out there, which isn't easy to do, just to help me out. Like I have that obligation to do the same thing for the next guy. Like someone did it for me. So my first order of business is I got to do it for that next guy. Now, today there's all these different ways of coming up and bullshitting people. But those people that are bullshitters, when we look out 5 years from now, you're going to forget most of them.
Yeah, they won't be there.
You won't even know they existed. But the people that were honest, the people that helped other people out, the people that stuck to the truth, you're going to remember those guys forever.
Well, they'll still be around too.
Yeah, they'll be around in like a different format.
Yeah, the good people last.
The bullshitters they'll start selling something else. They'll move to a totally different domain. And they have a new group of people to work off of. But everyone in the strength world is, that guy's full of shit.
You guys are selecting Merrick for your telehealth platform needs. They have a couple different ways that they go about doing this. The first is through a self-selected experience. So there's a table talk panel, which is the full panel. That would be the panel that I personally get twice a year. That's checking everything. You name it, it's all there. The other panel is a checkup panel with a guided optimization. You're connected with a patient care coordinator, and the patient care coordinator will meet with you to determine what your needs are. Thing to be able to help optimize your health or mitigate without judgment. So the discount code again is Table Talk Merrick Health for all your hormone optimization and performance needs. Today's episode is brought to you by Element, a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything that you need and nothing that you don't. In other words, no sugar, no artificial coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, and no BS. With Element, I love the watermelon. The watermelon tastes freaking awesome. I drank 1 pack every day, no matter what. People that train out here, it's sitting out here for them all the time. The boxes don't last very long. Right now, Element is offering Table Talk listeners a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 single-serving packages free with any Element order. Get yours at drinkelement.com/Table Talk. The deal is only available through the link in the description. The other thing is, if you don't like it, you can just give it away to a salty friend and Element will give you a 100% refund. no risk, money back guarantee. Head over to drinkelement.com/table talk. Today's episode is brought to you by First Detachment. Are you looking for a supplement brand that truly understands hardworking athletes? Look no further than First Detachment. 1D's real world experience is what I would consider, and they consider, battle tested. I have known Justin Harris for pretty close to 2 decades. And if there's anybody that I trust with nutritional and supplement needs, it's Justin Harris. If you guys have followed me and have followed the podcast, you pretty much already know how I feel about the supplement industry. For me to get behind any brand, I have to trust the brand and I have to trust the person both. And I'm pretty sure you guys all know why. When it comes to creating formulas and putting products on the market, and there's nobody that I trust more than Justin Harris. While I love all of their products, I'd suggest that you check out the Field Rations and WTH first. Go to www.firstdetachment.com and use the code TableTalk10 to save 10% off each order. The link is in the description. The way I kind of see what your program ideology is there's a group of, I don't know how many movements, but there's a group of what, like the barbell squat, deadlift, overhead press, chin ups, and a couple others, right? I'll let you tell how many here in a minute, but you have this group of movements that will expand or contract based upon what you want to do. So if you want to do the weightlifting, it's going to contract a little bit to allow more SPP for the weightlifting to come in there. Or the strongman, it will contract to be able to allow, in other words, it goes from kind of like being the main training to just being GPP, right? And then the strongman will fall in there, or the weightlifting will fall in there. So that main block is kind of what you establish, which would be that 50-to-1, right?
Yeah. The whole essence of the 50-to-1 program is you have the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
And if you take that 20%, you can still apply the 80-20 rule to that 20%. So if you're thinking in the context of a workout, and I use an example of someone going to a class workout for CrossFit. If you're there 20 minutes early, the class is an hour, and you're there 20 minutes later. So we'll think from the time you step in the door to the time you're walking out is an hour 40, because it's 100 minutes. So 80% of your results are only going to be 20 minutes of your time there. Yeah. A lot of that shit isn't making you better. It's necessary to do the important stuff. You're not going to walk up to the bar and hit a max rep set of squats with no warm up. So it's necessary in order to be able to do that work. So it's not like you can cut it out, but you need to understand what it's providing you. So when you understand that, hey, the goal of this is to warm up, the goal of it is not to get a workout. Your warm up is better, which makes your main stuff better. Your main set of squats. So if you take those 20 minutes, you can apply the 80-20 rule to that. So now you got about 4 minutes. That's going to be 64% of your results. Well, in those 4 minutes itself, you can apply the 80-20 rule again. Now you're left with about 1 minute. 1 minute of all your time in the gym is going to be about half your results. And if you actually look through, and if you were to put your whole workout on video, you could piece together that minute, which is half your results.
So easy. It's top set.
Or less. So.
Well, actually go into that, because I know what you're talking about. So the or less, go into that. If it's a top set, if it's or less of a top set, explain what you mean by that.
So it could even be less than a minute. So if you're talking a top set, not all 5 reps are the same.
Yeah.
Reps 4 and 5 are a whole lot different than reps 1, 2, and 3. So when you put it into the right importance and understand, hey, this workout today, I'm doing 5 reps at this weight. That is the workout. All this everything that happens before that point, I think of as a warm up. Every last bit of it. I might get on a bike and go a little bit. I might stretch out. Every single set up until that one was a warm up. So when I grab the bar and start squatting, that's really not doing shit for me. I'm not going to get any stronger if I was to walk out of the gym from here.
Mm-hmm.
I load a little weight. If I were to walk out of the gym after this point, I would not have gotten any stronger. But in this moment right here, where we're doing these 5 reps, this is all your results. This is what everything you've done up until this point for the last hour has been working towards. This is your results here, not all this other shit. So when I warm up, it's, hey, don't get on there and set your fastest 2 minutes you've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
I need to get loose. That's it. Same thing with all my warm up. If I'm doing warm up sets and I have the goal of getting that set of 5 done, I need to warm up exactly like I'm going to do those 5. So I'm not going to be doing some goofy shit on the warm up. My technique is going to be the same. My speed is going to be the same. They're going to be exactly like I'm doing them. I'm going to be thinking about that set in my head the entire time so that once I go to do it, I'm ready for it, versus doing all kinds of other stuff. And then when it comes time to do the work that's actually making you better, you're not there.
Yeah.
You either psych yourself out, you haven't warmed up properly, you're moving at a different speed, you're moving at something changes where now you fail it because you prioritized hitting that set, 2 sets prior, rather than this one that really matters. Or you're thinking about the accessory work you're going to do after, and you half-ass that top set. Oh, well, I'm going to make it up and I'm going to go really hard and get a pump on all this other shit. No, the train has left the station.
Mm-hmm.
That opportunity to get stronger is gone. You had to get those 5 reps done. So that's the whole essence of the 50-to-1 program.
All right. So let's stay with that and let's run through different scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's the 5 reps. The last 2 really are the most important, right? Rep 1 and 2 kind of hard. Rep 3, you're like, fuck. Rep 4, you either got to buckle down or not. All right. Now, if they just come in and they know that's what it is, they can't half-ass all the shit to try to make that easier, because they might fuck it up and not be ready.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm just going through what I know younger people are going to think. If that one matters, well, I'm not going to do anything if that doesn't work. But I guess that still becomes the main indicator, because if things go wrong, you only get 4. Technique breaks down on 5. Then you got to self-assess what the fuck happened.
Mm-hmm.
What did I do or not do before this, right? And then if things go wrong, what happens after? Could be either you're overreached and you're done, or it was a technical fuck up and you need to work your technique. So that main indicator plays into a lot of different factors, going all the way back to, did you sleep? Did you eat right? Everything plays into that.
Yeah. And if that's my top set, I'm building backwards from that. So that's what I care about. I'm going to pretend like everything after that doesn't exist. Yep. If I was going to walk out of the gym after that point, which I do all the time.
Yep.
Like that's also the point of understanding it, is that when your life gets busy, you come in, you do that. It's all the other shit you get rid of, not that portion. So you can maintain a ton of your strength when life just blows up in your face.
Mm-hmm.
Come in, get that done. See you later. Done. I'm out of here. But as I build backwards, if you're let's just say you're building to 300 pounds, you need to, before the workout, tell yourself, what do I have to do prior to that to feel ready? What do I need to do so I know I'm going to get that done? And that can be a few different things. If you're lifting 300 pounds, prior to that, you might build up to, a decent single. I'm going to build up to 325, low reps, singles. Mm-hmm. I might do 305, 315, 325 as a single. Now go back to 300 for a set of 5. And that's a way to get a little bit more of that high end nervous system training. You're not really getting that much more volume, but you get a little bit. And now 300 feels light. But you're not so fatigued you can't get that 300 done.
Yeah.
Other people, they're pressed for time, or they don't necessarily need that. They're already good at the limit strength aspect of it. It's a little unnecessary for them to do that. Well, you can only take such big jumps. So that's going to be what's the biggest jump I can take? Well, you're not going to go bigger than that. So from 300, and I normally err on the side of more volume warming up than less.
Yeah.
So to go to 300, I'm probably not going to take more than a 25-pound jump. So prior to that, I got to lift at least 275 to be ready, probably 285. So I would probably go from 300, I'd go 285, 265, 245, 225, 195, 165, 135, 95 the bar. Now that whole series gets me ready. It's all necessary because if I don't do it, this isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
If I'm going the bar 135, 225, 300, when I go to put 300 on my body, it's going to kill me.
Yes.
It's just too big of a jump. And I think of it like getting in a pool. If you go run and jump in a pool, you're freezing your ass off. But if instead you had 10 pools of successively colder water, you acclimate to each one. So I get into a pool, normal temp. My body cools, my sensation, I become a little desensitized to it. I get into the next pool, the next pool, the next pool. Now when I get in that water, this is comfortable. This isn't that big of a deal. But if I just run and did a cannonball in it, I'm going to be freezing my ass off. My body's going to say, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
So that's the whole purpose of those warm-up sets. The purpose is to acclimate the nervous system so that once you're there, you actually get that set done. And once that set is done, I look at all of the numbers that I do purely objectively. So in terms of the work itself, I want to quantify what that work is. I want to quantify the intensity or whatever it is. I'm using RPE as my gauge for how much progression I'm going to add in the future or what I need to do to change in the workout. So if I do that set and it's an RPE 9, but it's a PR, that was a PR. That's the hardest set I've ever done. I've never lifted to that point before, and it's an RPE 9. Well, shit, I'm going to have no problem going up next week. If that top set was 300 for 10, which is a score of 400, I'm going to think, well, if I did an extra rep, what would it be? Well, it'd be 410, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
So I performed at that point, but if I really wanted to, I could have had more right now. From now until next week, if I fully recover, there's no reason why I'm not going to at least match that performance or go up.
Mm-hmm.
I could have done it today. So a week from now, the only reason that I can't perform at that level is that one of two things. Either I'm a big pussy about it.
Yeah.
And, I just didn't want to do it. It wasn't there that day.
Mm-hmm.
But I know I can do it. I'm being a pussy today.
Yeah.
Could have done it last week. If I was fully recovered, I can do it this week, unless I'm just a giant pussy about it. Or I'm not fully recovered, which means something has to change. I need to do something differently in my full process so that I can recover and continue making progress. So from that week to this week, I got weaker. Now, long-term, all that.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. I'm not actually weaker. It's short-term fluctuation, blah, blah, blah. But mentally in my head, I'm saying, you're only as good as you are right this moment. And this moment, you got weaker. And you got weaker because you didn't sleep enough. Your food is shitty. You're, stressed out with school or work or kids or some other element. So one of those things needs to get better so that I can continue to perform at that level and make progress. So one bad workout's not a big deal, but now when you're going through that kind of assessment, you have now changed training into an iterative process. You've shortened up your evaluation period. So instead of waiting 8 to 12 weeks, where then you hit a max, and in 8 to 12 weeks, you're probably going to hit a new max, you're not actually doing all the other elements of training at a higher level till maybe years down the road. Because you hit a PR, you hit a PR, you hit a PR. You don't think there's a problem in there. But if from this week to this week, I said, well, fuck. And this is the strongman mentality speaking. I want to be ready to throw down with the barbell at any point. if any one of my buddies was like, hey, we're gonna
Mhm.
we're gonna fucking go toe to toe today, you know, I'm in town, we got a weekend, I want to be ready right off the bat. So if I'm looking at it like, hey, my performance got worse from last week, what do I need to change to improve that recovery? Something has to change. I either have to admit that I'm just a big pussy and I didn't try hard enough. And for some people, that's it.
Yeah.
That'll take you really, really far.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't do it because I'm a pussy. And next week, I'm going to remember what it felt like to have to say that. And I'm going to train harder. And next week, I'm getting those reps. That's the adjustment. There's plenty of times that you're going to have to say it. It's just not there today.
Oh, yeah.
But if you avoid it, you know, you're not going to push yourself to that next level. So next week, not an issue, especially if you're talking like a teenager or someone who's only been training for months or even a couple years. That'll get you really, really goddamn strong. Your other answer that you can give is, well, I'm under recovered. So improve my sleep, improve my nutrition, improve something. I got to have something to say, this is what I'm changing week to week in order to recover better and then be able to perform it.
Yeah.
So when you look out over the course of like your first 2 years, each week you've been evaluating yourself on either, I just need to learn how to perform and push myself, or I need to change all these other elements of training. So at the 2-year mark, it might not be a huge difference in terms of all your progress, but you understand how to train so much better that those skills are going to carry on when you start getting to the point where lifting isn't fun all the time. You got a hell of a grind and a hell of a buildup for each PR. You know how to do that. You know how to be self-aware. You know how to assess. You know how to change those things. And so at the 2-year mark, you can eat shitty food all you want. You're not going to notice a difference your first 2 years of lifting.
Yeah.
But by 2 years,
yeah, you're going to catch up though.
At 2 years, all those weeks that you looked at and said, hey man, you know, I didn't perform my best, you know, and part of that was eating shit. Well, your diet looks better, which doesn't matter at first, but it starts to matter. Your sleep looks better because all those times you performed poorly, you evaluated it and said, yeah, I didn't get a good night of sleep. I need to, you know, I got to put in some blackout curtains. I got to be disciplined about going to bed on time. Your stress is better because you're looking at it like, well, I had a shitty workout because I was thinking about the fight I had with my wife yesterday. And it was in my head the whole time. Well, find a way to not fight with your wife. Get home a little earlier, stop being a dickhead. So down the road, those skills pay off of having changed the training process to look at it and say, I'm under recovering right now. I need to change all those elements because recovery will really matter when I'm a 700-pound squatter. It doesn't matter now because I'm only squatting, 350.
Yeah.
But at 700, the biggest thing that's going to hold me back are those little things which you don't start working on until you're far down the road. You don't work on them until you're forced to work on them. But if you can get ahead of that,
yes,
and change that evaluation process from 8 to 12 weeks down to, a week frame.
Yeah.
Now you're constantly looking at all the little things you do and seeing how they all matter.
Yeah. When I was saying earlier that there was some similarities to conjugate, that's where it is because in conjugate, people have max effort movements that are these consistent indicators to be able to gauge. So it's not what most people would have thought when I was first saying that, because it's not a conjugate program, but that having those checks and balances, along the way kind of lets you know, and you don't have to wait for a fucking meet, or you don't have to wait for the 12 weeks. And in isolation, that all sounds easy and it's very clear for people to understand and important to understand. But now when you throw 4 other movements in there, right? So say that's a squat, then you have in a front squat and a clean and all this other stuff, then you have systemic fatigue that can be accumulating because of that. So how do you approach that?
So at first,
well, first off, is there just one movement per day that has that intent?
Yeah, there's only one movement per day.
Yes.
So you're not gonna be doing multiple movements of that difficulty. You could if you were really that busy where, you know, that's the only way it's going to work is if I combine these things. You would probably prioritize one or the other. You wouldn't do both. But you could, if, you know, time was, I really only do have 2 days to train. I can't fit it in because the workouts, I don't work out for a very long period of time. I'm not putting in these 3-hour marathon training sessions. They're usually of actual work. They're maybe an hour. Now it takes me longer because sometimes I get my gym bag out and I just stare at it and it's like, oh, I'm going to take 10 minutes. You know, nowadays it's a little different than before. Like I'll take 10 minutes where it's like, damn, I need 10 minutes because I was just dealing with my kids running and screaming. I need 10 minutes to clear my head before I start this workout. So it might take me an hour and a half, but of actual work, it's usually an hour. So I'll train more frequently. But if someone really had to combine them because they go to a gym that's far away and it's difficult to train more frequently, they could. But you'd probably prioritize one or the other. So early on, I could do, 3 different movements a week like that, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, your typical linear progression. So it's really fundamentally not any different than linear progression. It's the exact same stuff. But as you get better, this is something, I think it was, I don't know how to say their last name. It's Croc.
Just Croc.
Yeah. So it was something Croc put out that said
Krozelinski.
They switched their deadlift training from, you normally think of a week as 7 days, but that's just because it's on the calendar. That's our shortest, repeating block, on your schedule. But changing your deadlift to think of it as every 10 days. So instead of, as you get stronger and that systemic fatigue from the deadlift builds up, don't think of your deadlift as a weekly thing. Just think of your training as whatever. You can use any kind of block of time as a week. So think of your deadlift first. When you start out, you can deadlift heavy every week, but then there will be a time you can only deadlift heavy every 8 days, every 9 days, every 10 days. So making that transition where, they're saying at first I went from 7 days to doing it every 10 days. But now that I've gotten stronger, it's too fatiguing. I need to move to every 14 days. So as I progressed, that systemic fatigue becomes a problem where Monday's workout, I'm too worn out on Wednesday. So I'll switch from maybe 3 days a week that are like that down to 2 days a week, and just rotate the movement.
I got it.
So week 1 will be back squat. Week 2 will be back squat. Week 3, I'm not pushing the back squat. So they rotate where you're only doing 2. And then eventually you get to a point where 1 movement a week creates so much systemic fatigue, you're only doing 1 a week. And that's it. There's no way you could do 2.
Okay.
And if you do 2, you're going to overreach.
Yeah.
And the next week, you're not even going to get 1. So you're lowering that frequency of how often you push above and beyond that, because that systemic fatigue is going to prevent you from doing it on multiple movements. And I still do it to myself, today, because something will come up unexpectedly where it's like, well, yeah, we're going to throw down. We're going heavy today. We're not, fuck that. Fuck the program. We're not going to stick to all that shit. And so I might have had like a really hard workout on Monday. Then I come in, it'll be like a tough, unexpectedly might be a tough workout on Thursday. And then, the weekend rolls around, like, man, I feel so good. I feel awesome. Like I feel so strong. Everything's moving well. I thought I'd be beat up. So you push that timeline a little bit, maybe do another hard workout. And then it all catches up to you at one time where you're like, I got a week of feeling like absolute dog shit. So it just happened to me recently at the CrossFit Games, where I took a red-eye flight on Wednesday. It was awful. Like an idiot. I always book an aisle seat, and I didn't think ahead of time. I was just booking it. That it's a red-eye. I need to book a window seat so I can sleep. So I get there. I slept 2 hours for Wednesday. Thursday was a hard workout. Friday, you know, there's a really popular CrossFit athlete, Sarah Sigmund's daughter. So I started off doing clean and jerks, and they turned into clean and not pass outs.
Mm-hmm.
So I started, fuck it, I'm gonna do cleans. It's too humid here. I'm dripping wet. I'll do my jerks afterwards out of the rig. So I do jerks, and I dropped the bar. It's 425. She had started working out next to me, and the whole time I'm like, fuck, this Sarah Sigmund's daughter right there. So she said, "Oh man, that would have been really impressive if you re-racked it." Oh, fuck. And at that point, the workout was over. I'm like, all right, this thing is done. So I'm like, oh yeah, you know what? I just kind of messed up, fuck. So I load the bar and I go, well, fuck, we got to go heavier. Mm-hmm. We got to go heavier and throw in the re-rack. So I go up in weight again, and this one, and the place is hot as fuck. So I stick the jerk, and this one, the walls are closing in on me. And I was like, I'm not re-racking this fucking thing. I'm going to pass out. So I dropped that one, and I go, well, shit, I can't repeat the weight. I got to go up. So I go up another time. This one went way better, and I nailed it. I re-racked it. I walked into the rig, pretended like, oh yeah, it's not a big deal. It's just normal workout here. So I leave, and feel pretty good. My body's moving great, ton of energy. The next day, something similar happens. So I'm at one of the gyms close to the event. And what all those vendors do is they move in and they rent out a gym. They bring all their athletes, and they'll host seminars, and they use it as a big marketing ploy. Mm-hmm. So I start warming up, and the Wisconsin is so humid. My hands are dripping sweat off them. They're literally pouring sweat off my fingertips. So I try to chalk my hands. You can't keep chalk on your hands. Yeah, there's literally nothing there. So I put straps on. The fucking straps get soaked all the way through. You could squish them and hear them on the bar. So I'm like, all right, I think this workout's over. Well, as I was done with the workout, this guy walks in, and at one point he was without a doubt the strongest CrossFit athlete. And he's a great guy. He comes in with his whole crew and like, oh man, you're here, make a big deal out of it. And then they start egging me on a little bit. I'm like, oh, well, I guess so. We're going to go fucking heavy today. Come on. We're not here to dick around. So that workout, I push the limits a bit and get to that near max weight. And same thing. I'm like, man, I feel great the rest of the day. I feel good. And then even the next day was kind of, it was more of a recovery workout. I didn't go very heavy. But into the next week, my body feels great. And then all of a sudden, it all catches up where it's like, holy shit, I can't move anything right now. Mm-hmm. Like, so it's tricky in the sense of once you start getting to those higher levels, your systemic fatigue is not only higher, but it's incredibly variable. Yeah. It's all over the place. There's things that you would think, hey, I'm going to be totally wrecked here. I'm going to be wiped out, not be able to move. And it does nothing but make you feel 10 times better. And you're so amped after those workouts sometimes that you think you're going to be fine. And so you do another one, or you make poor decisions. And then it catches up to you where you got like a week and a half of just dog shit lifting because you're completely fried. So I went through that like 2 weeks ago, like a series of workouts, just kicking ass and being like, oh yeah, we're good. Keep going. And then all of it adds up and piles on like all at the same point where it's like, man, I got a whole week of not doing shit because
well, they make for great fucking stories for one, right? But they're also great reminders too.
So then afterwards, then it's in my head. I'm like, oh man, fuck, it starts getting in your head of like, oh, I'm at 80% and the goddamn bar is glued to the ground. And then you have one good workout and you forget all about it. You're like, okay, no, I'm fine. I'm going to live. But like those times, like it really fucks with you of going through those fluctuations. So going back to having like a clear indicator.
Yes.
You know, you need that point to understand this is where I'm at. You need something to be able to objectively say, I am adding some kind of progression to the training, that there was an increase in what I did. And for me, I'll use RPE as some of that. I'll use RPE both as an indicator of this is where I'm at, but its bigger use for me personally is evaluating the recovery aspect. So on a weekly basis, I'm looking at it and breaking that down. If performance went up, no questions asked, good. I don't care about all that shit. Adios. I'm not going to sit here and review this workout. I'm moving on to next week. And hopefully that's most of the time. But some of the time is I didn't have what I was trying to do. And when you're first starting off within training, that should only be, you know, maybe every 5-6 sessions would be a little too much. You're looking at it and looking at that RPE and saying, well, I'm either a big pussy about it and I need to suck it up, look in the mirror, decide if I really want to do this and go forward, or change my sleep, change my eating, change my stress levels, change all that stuff so that going forward, I'm better about the process of training.
So what would be how many base movements make up just the strength aspect?
Maybe 3.
So 3 base movements.
Yeah, it's mostly, and that's partially going to be context dependent. So if someone doesn't have a sport, I have them do.
Well, this is just say if it's you, because we're navigating through.
If it's me, that's going to be squat.
Yes.
It's going to be overhead press. It's going to be deadlift.
Got it.
And that's it. So that is exactly what I did. You know, training for Strongman was that the core of the program was back squat, overhead press, and deadlift.
Yes. So that's you've established your minimal effective dose on those things. So when the strongman comes in, that's all you do with those. And then the strongman goes.
So I'm using those 3 movements as my GPP.
Yes.
You're not actually going to go into a contest and do any kind of variation of squat, which you would do in the gym. So this is not sport specific training. This is GPP. So the technique that I use for squat is the one which is going to give me the best stimulus, and which is typically whatever style of squat puts the least stress on the joints. When you're going to go try to do strongman shit, you're going to beat yourself up with yoke and all these other things. So my GPP can't be beating me up. Like that, something that's not sport specific can't be beating me up. So I started early on squatting like a weightlifter, because to me, that was what put the least amount of stress. That is what I could train the hardest and feel like, man, my quads have blown up and I can't move my legs, but all my joints feel great. Everything else feels fine. And when I would low bar or squat wider or do something else, I would lift more weight, but I'd also feel more beat up. Yeah. I'd get done with it and be like, man, this fucked me up. When I squatted high bar, I'm like, man, I could do 20 rep squats. Every joint feels great. Knee, my back, knees, everything feels like there's no strain on them at all. So with the goal of doing strongman, it's like, well, my GPP is going to be a high bar back squat because I have the mobility to do it. And that's the same thing on the overhead press. You're not going to do a standard barbell overhead press in strongman. So the overhead press is GPP. You also need to do the strongman specific overhead work, but just from a base strength standpoint, building up the strength and the endurance overhead pressing, a standard barbell press puts way less stress than those sport specific implements. It creates better joint alignment. It's more standardized. So as far as a progression of getting stronger, that is going to be better than trying to get all my training in of just sport specific.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing on the deadlift. You know, you'll occasionally have a standard deadlift in a strongman competition at the amateur level, but a lot of times they'll put some kind of twist on there. And this throws off a lot of people because they will use an axle, or they'll use an elevated deadlift. They'll do something that is close but not quite the same. So my deadlift technique when I'm in the gym, I want that to be the one that is the least stress on the joints, the least physically demanding, so that I can save all that wear and tear for the sport specific stuff. I'm not going to beat myself up if the only purpose of this workout is to be stronger. A big element of that is how much fatigue and how much wear and tear is it causing. So I would do a lot of those movements like a weightlifter because of their injury rate, and just from a physiological standpoint.
So are you speaking like snatch grip deadlifts or just?
No, just a standard deadlift, but we're talking with a neutral spine.
Okay, I got it.
You know, I'm not gonna pull with a rounded back. Yeah. When we're talking about the overhead press, it's going to be collarbone level. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a full lockout all the way past into a quality overhead position. It's going to be those little pieces. Now, when I get into adding the strongman with it, those movements, it's, well, how do I get the best performance at the competition? What technique is going to get me the results that I need in competition? Now, if it beats the shit out of me, it beats the shit out of me. That's the whole goal of, I'm there to win. I'm not there. Yeah. I'm not using these to get stronger. This is a competition. It's a test of your strength. In that test, I'm only going with what they allow in the competition. So if it's the yoke, I'm not thinking, oh, how do I put the least amount of stress on my joints and how do I save myself? I'm thinking, how do I move this heavy ass thing as fast as I possibly can across that line? It's the same thing on deadlift. When I'm practicing, you know, whatever the competition specific deadlift is going to be, I'm going to practice it exactly like I would do in competition. So if it's something like a deficit deadlift, well, I'm not going to try to do a deficit deadlift with a neutral spine. That's stupid. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to pull any weight. So then I'll introduce, you know, more rounded back deadlifts in there to get ready for that specific movement.
There's still skill you have to learn for those movements too.
Well, that's the part of it.
Okay.
Like like right now, my deadlift is absolutely dog shit because I don't have that motor pattern ingrained again. Mm-hmm. When you do cleans and snatches and all of it's with a neutral spine, when you have just a little bit of round, you're like, oh shit, it's over. Like that, I'm completely bent over. But you watch it on video, and I'm like, man, I felt like, you know, my back totally crumbled. And it's like, oh, it moved like half an inch. You're just so used to being neutral that in your head, you're not comfortable pulling those weights. Like as soon as you're in that position, you're like, oh, this is unsafe. And you just totally shut down. But when I'm looking at it, it's like, oh, I used to pull with way more flexion through the top of the back. And it was perfectly fine. It felt normal. It felt the same like that felt. Mm-hmm. What's changed is the perception. So you have to practice those movements from a skill point. And that is how I would incorporate them into the overall program.
All right. So from that skill point, what intensity or percentage of weight are you using to be able to maximize that skill? Because you can do, you know, if I'm teaching a power lifter, I'm going to do dowel rod squats for, mm-hmm. you know, but with strongman, it's going to be different. Even with powerlifting to a certain point, there's skill with no weight, there's skill with submaximal weight, and then there's skill with maximal weight.
So for strongman, I'm going to do, there is your minimum effective dose.
Yeah.
And if I'm looking at it from a standpoint of, I still need to build the general strength to compete with these guys. Yeah. So this was, you know, pretty early on. Like when I first started competing in strongman, it was, I don't have the strength to compete with these guys generally. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how good I get at these movements, I'm not going to beat them yet. Mm-hmm. So I would do those more basic barbell movements and that was my minimum effective dose. I know if I can do this stuff, I will get stronger. I'm going to close that gap of general strength that I need. Now, along the way, I'm going to put, as much volume as possible, training those specific movements up to my maximum recoverable volume.
Okay.
So, and I'm using the RPE as a gauge of that maximum recoverable volume.
How so?
Because if that score gets worse, so when we talked about, you went from 400.
Yeah.
Next week, I performed like shit, and I asked the question, "Hey, am I
I get it.
You're pussy?
Going back to I get it.
Or am I under recovered?"
Yeah.
Well, if I'm under recovered, the answer might be I did too much work.
Mm-hmm.
It might be. So if I'm looking at my sleep, I'm looking at my food, I'm looking at all this stuff and saying, hey, I'm at a pretty good level. I'm eating well, sleeping well, not real stressed. I'm doing all those things. And you look at those first.
Mm-hmm.
You don't look at those after the fact. You say, maybe I'm doing too much work. I don't have that ability to recover yet, and I need to dial it back.
Mm-hmm.
You have a clear indicator on both of those weeks of your level of performance. So now I can look back and say, I did too much stuff. I worked too hard.
Yeah.
I'm unable to recover from that level of work. And now I know where that maximum recoverable volume is, which fluctuates. It goes up, it goes down, but I know where that is. So that is at the bottom of that list, because if you tell people that, that'll be the first thing. Oh, I couldn't perform like that because I worked so goddamn hard last week that there's no way to do it.
That's a good point.
But there is a point where, yes, you have exceeded your maximum recoverable volume, and you did do too much work. At first, it's unlikely, but especially when you're talking about guys who can train kind of at a moderate intensity. Again, moderate to them. But that is creating so much fatigue. You start having to be really cautious about being beyond that recoverable volume. So mentally, like when you do a really tough workout, they got a guy that's an absolute animal. He doesn't think he exceeded his limit. Like mentally, oh, fuck it. I can get to that point and totally crush it. But physically, he's exceeded the limit. Most people, they haven't become desensitized to the pain where they're really going to do too much work and go too hard, and they're going to go beyond their maximum recoverable volume. Before then, you're going to be tired. You're not going to want to do it. It's going to suck. You didn't work too hard. That's probably not the right answer. It's probably something else is why you're under recovered. But over time, especially, people that can really push themselves, they'll get to that point. They'll get to that point where this guy is just an animal. He totally killed it. And now he's performing like shit because he did work too hard. So that is an option to tell yourself. But that's that concept of maximum recoverable volume. It's only useful if you have indicators of how you performed. So if I have an indicator week 1 and week 2 to say I was at this level and now got worse, it could be you trained too hard.
Yeah.
Unlikely, but it's possible. Now, if that's the answer, that means that sport-specific practice needs to tone down a little bit. So a typical workout, let's say, it's overhead press. You're going to have a pretty tight amount of work to build up to a max rep set. When I'm done with that didn't take me very long to get to. Warm up, build up, I'm there. All of my accessory is going to be the Strongman specific implements.
Mm-hmm.
So if you got a log coming up, I'm not going to, now that I've hit my minimum effective dose, where I know that I'm going to get strong, that workout was strong enough, hit that intensity that I needed, I'm going to make up the volume with Strongman specific implements. Now, if I don't have a competition, or for whatever reason, I don't give a shit, you could get that volume in with a variety of different things. I could go back down and weight and do more, shoulder press. I could do dumbbell shoulder press. You could do all kinds of stuff. But if you got a competition coming up, the rest of that volume is going to come from log, or it's going to come from axle presses, or going to come from something, more weird like keg presses. And the purpose of that session is skill. So again, when you're looking at something like the context of that 50-to-1 approach, I've done the 50 piece. I got that. I hit a new level of intensity. I trained hard. I got that piece. This other stuff, I'm approaching this. I'm not trying to lift the heaviest goddamn keg I can. I'm not trying to push the limits on this and really stress myself out and push my body on the keg. I'm worried about, how do I develop skill? How do I get better at the movement? My primary focus is I want to step up there for the competition and be efficient. I want my hands in the right spot. I want to be smooth. I want to have a good gauge of what I can do. So if it's a minute and you got, max keg press, you can plan that out and say, hey, I'm going to do 8 reps and I'm going to spread that out. I'm not getting into that trap. If I come out there, crush 3 reps as quick as I can, 1 rep, it kind of sucked, but I got it. And then I stare at the clock for 30 seconds while they count my time down. And I finish at 4. If I know how many I can do, I can spread that out.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a nice pace. The event is max reps in a minute, not max reps in an Instagram reel, or not max reps of like how many you can do and please the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
It's in a minute. And if you can only do this many, use your whole minute. So all of those skills and all of those things are what I'm trying to get out of all that accessory work, so that I can, build the specific strength of that movement in particular. I have the skill that goes along with it. And then I have a good plan going into the competition of, this is what I'm capable of. This is what I'm going to do. I need to know, if it's part of a medley, I need to know ahead of time, hey, is this going to be a near max lift and I really got to take my time on it? Or am I going to jump in there and crush it? And I'm worried about how fast I can get through these 4 things, because simple bad strategy is going to lose you the whole event.
Mm-hmm.
This guy beat me by a second because I was too timid about it. I thought it was going to be really heavy. It wasn't. And I crushed that rep and I lost a second, and he beat me by half a second. So just the bad strategy. Yeah, I'm stronger than the guy. I'm in better shape. I'm more capable than he is, but mentally he beat me because he was more prepared. So that's what I'm trying to get out of the accessory stuff.
Yeah,
is all those little elements.
So when we take that over into weightlifting, it's the same philosophy then.
Mostly, it's going to be, it'll be a little bit different, because the stimulus from weightlifting is different than the stimulus from strongman.
Because it's lighter, or because it's more technical?
Both.
Okay.
Strongman beats the shit out of you. So when I do like a heavy yoke session, not even heavy, like a moderate yoke session, I get done and I'm like, man, I got to go take a nap. Like my brain is fried. Like my nervous system is just crushed. I can do a really tough weightlifting session and I'm fired up. I'm ready to go. It doesn't have that same level of fatigue. So, it also has a much higher level of skill. So when I first started doing more weightlifting, I treated weightlifting purely like a sport like golf. I treated it as if these movements are going to do jack shit for my strength, because they were. When I first started weightlifting, and again, I've never pulled a true 1 rep max deadlift, but shit, I can pull 600 for reps, and that's not a problem. So when I started, doing snatches at 200 pounds, it's not real fatiguing. It's not going to be that hard. It's not going to be that much stress. It might be a little bit of stress. And even then I could do overhead squats pretty well. So doing snatches at 200 pounds, shit, this is not causing me any problems. So I can't use those as a main movement. I don't have the skill required to fully express my abilities. You know, if you look at technique or skill, you have your general ability as a bigger circle, and your technique or skill as a smaller circle within that. But my technique and skill is a little tiny little blip inside of all that ability. I mean, if you're only clean and jerk, if you're not even clean and jerking half of what you deadlift, this clean and jerk workout's not making you stronger.
Yeah.
You suck too much at the movements. Like you have to be pretty good at them.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be great. You don't have to be phenomenal. But when I first started, my rack position was so shitty. My timing was shitty. Every aspect of the movement sucked. So when I practice, this isn't making me stronger. It's not hard enough. These are light weights. They're not particularly challenging. And when I look at kind of the general strength of where I'm starting at, and I'm looking at, the numbers I'm putting up, the gap is so big that it's like, if I don't need to get any stronger, I don't need to put any more work in to become strong in a general sense. It's 100% skill work. So when I first started, it was do the absolute least amount that I can to not go backwards. I'm not going to let myself get weaker.
Yeah.
But every last bit of extra work that I put into getting stronger is a trade-off of the skill work to get more efficient at the movements. So I would do it of what is the least amount I can get away with without getting weaker, and then every other last bit of time and energy spent on skill work. So the way that I learn the lifts is a little different than the way that most people learn them. Most people are learning the lifts while they're getting stronger. They're incorporating both elements, and there's two different, there's a skill component, there's just a general strength component. And if you're starting off and you haven't been lifting very long, you can use those movements as both. You can use them to become more skilled. You can use them to get stronger. If you've only been lifting for 6 months, you don't have a ton of experience, so you're not particularly strong, and you have someone to teach you, doing those cleans and snatches and jerks and all that is going to make you stronger. But when you're already at, a much, much higher level of strength and your technique totally sucks, you can't express that strength well enough because you're losing so much in your shitty technique that they're not making you any stronger from a general sense. So I broke it down where I would view the workout as first, do just enough to not get worse, and then all skills. So I learned them from a standpoint of all I care about is the skill component. I don't care anything at all from how this is making me better generally. So I broke them down to like a much more, base level, like a much, much smaller step scale than a lot of people learn. And it was because A, I only care about the skill. B, I have specific problems that I have because of Strongman. In Strongman, the first one that I had to learn was how to pull with a neutral spine. I had no chance. Like, I'd grab the bar and it was like, when you get to the power position on the clean or snatch, you're extending through the back and you're losing a shitload of power. So I lived on the glute ham developer. And one of them was a stupid video Klokov put up where he does some of those videos. You don't know how hard those movements are until you do them. So I think he's doing like 155 pounds, which is heavy as fuck for the movement he's doing. But I would just do hip extensions with a empty bar on my back because it locks your back in position. And I'd do them every single day until I got it out of my head that when I pull, you're rounded at the back and you're using thoracic extension to move the weight. The other one was, there's a power lifter. He had a super specific drill for building tension in the deadlift that I stole. It was, I have no clue what his name is, but he basically gets in position and he intentionally puts more flexion in the T-spine and only extends out of the T-spine and lifts it up. I have no clue what the movement's called, But I took that, old fat powerlifter trick where they were using to teach people to build tension in the deadlift and said, oh, well, that's exactly my problem. I go to grab the bar. My spine mobility sucks ass. I can't get in position. So I would do these weighted, I guess you can call it like a T-spine deadlift or something, where I would try to develop that mind muscle connection and then only move at the T-spine. And that's it. So the bar is only coming up a couple inches, but that was just to get the strength and hold the top of the back where it needs to be. And so I was doing a lot of goofy shit like that. Like all of this little weird goofy things because my technique had these problems because of the years of strongman training. Like my motor patterns were refined for strongman.
Yeah.
So to now come do something with those challenges, I was like, well, I got to learn this differently than all these other people. These people aren't coming in with these, powerlifting numbers and with this background. So they can learn it that way. But until I fix this problem, it's always going to suck. So I had to learn hook grip, which was the worst. I didn't have skin on my thumbs for forever. Then my front rack sucked, so I learned all the different ways that you can beat the shit out of your shoulders to make them more flexible. But it was until I get my front rack better, my clean is gonna suck and the jerks are gonna suck. There's no way around it. So I quit pressing for like 6 months because it was, hey, I'm okay with my press going down 20 pounds because I still press way more than what I need to be able to jerk, but I'm too stiff. So I would have different ways to front squat and different ways to warm up. And every session is just purely skill.
But it's all based on that skill. So then how are you, what metric are you using to determine if that skill is improving? Just video?
Mostly video.
Yeah, because it's got to feel a certain way too.
Yeah, it's mostly video of how it makes the main lift look better.
Yeah.
And then a slight amount of, doing the lift and what numbers I can hit.
Okay.
But those to me were so obvious that it's like I don't even need to measure the improvement on the lift because it made the way the lift feel. It made the way that the lift feels so much better.
Yeah.
And it made it so much sharper that it was like there's no question I could come in and do more weight now. So when I first I was still competing in strongman. It was 2015, CrossFit for the Open had this max clean and jerk as one of the open workouts. And I was getting my ass kicked by guys that are like 80 pounds lighter. And they just kicked the shit out of me. I couldn't hook grip. I couldn't have a front rack, so I could only power clean. And so I hated it. I just hated watching some scrawny kid just kick the shit out of me. And it doesn't matter what the barbell movement is. It's like, I don't care. This guy's kicking my ass. So when I first started training, like I knew those things that I had to fix. And the progression was basically like a direct correlation. Like as soon as this is fixed, I know I'm going to clean 10 more pounds. As soon as this is fixed, I know I'm good for another 10 pounds. So there wasn't really any need to have like to even try to manage fatigue on the lifts themselves or to have any kind of indicator on the lift because the trade or the results were basically like a 1-to-1. Like
I get it.
As soon as that can get a neutral spine, boom, clean's already 20 pounds heavier. Or the weights that I was doing before are so much easier. Like, oh, this obviously got better. It wasn't until probably like a good year plus in where now I have enough skill that I'm actually able to express my strength. And so now these movements are becoming challenging. Like now these movements can be used to train power. They can be used to train all these skills and these general abilities because I have enough skill that I can use most of my strength. So, for instance, the snatch was easier for me to learn because my overhead position was way better than the front rack. Just the muscles that are required to rotate were an issue. So I could use the snatch and the clean, or I could use the snatch as a partial replacement for the deadlift, because now I can actually push myself. I actually have a stimulus, from that snatch workout.
Yeah.
Before, it was the weight's so light. This shit is like, no problem. This is, I could substitute the snatch for any glute machine in the gym and just get a pump. And it's basically the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But now, once you have that skill, it's like, okay, if I push myself on the snatch, now we have a problem of both local and systemic fatigue. Before, there was no systemic fatigue. The weight's too light. I can't push myself that hard. So I didn't even have to manage it. It's just go in, do as much snatching as you can, and get better at it. Then, you close that gap between, your general strength and then your specific strength of that movement. So now, before I was maybe using, half my strength because my technique sucks so bad. Now I'm using, my technique is decent. I mean, I'm using 90% of what my full potential is. Okay, at this point, now we need to swap, the deadlifts for the snatches and eventually the cleans, because they are going to create a high level of systemic fatigue. And in that, I'm doing that kind of more, I wouldn't say traditionally, but you don't really have sets in the way that you have a set of deadlifts or the way that you have a set in a traditional sense. Every snatch or clean and jerk is technically one rep. The only difference is how much break you take in between them.
Yeah.
We'll call it a double or we'll call it a triple. It's not. It's 3 singles.
Mm-hmm.
It's 3 quick singles, or it's 3. And when you call it a single, well, yeah, it's 3 slow singles.
Yeah.
But they're all singles because you don't have that eccentric portion.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the time under tension. And that's where a lot of the fatigue happens. So you're mostly, you're not going to be able to evaluate and judge in the same way that you would evaluate a deadlift. So in that way that I could say, hey, the intensity of this set was higher because it has a higher score. I can't say that on the Olympic lifts because technically I'm always doing 1 rep. So it's more off of a tonnage and average intensity standpoint. And it's also far more RPE based than it was before because of that technical component. So if I'm trying to really refine the skill of it, then I'm not going to be stuck to the weight that I'm trying to use. I'm not going to say like, hey, today I'm going to hit this number. I'll have a range, like today's supposed to be moderate or today's supposed to be heavy. And it's going to be moderate or heavy based on that day, based on whatever the technique is going to allow, based on however it's moving at that point.
All right, so that's assuming, the technique starts to break down, it's done.
Yeah.
Speed's too slow, it's done.
Mm-hmm. And the speed is almost always there because there's a minimum speed you have to hit to make the lift. But for me, the things that'll start to happen is you get fatigue. You're not able to maintain a neutral spine anymore. And so now when that point happens, I'm either too fatigued or, maybe I had a hard workout and my back hasn't recovered yet. For me, all that's going to do at this point is reinforce bad movement patterns. So what I'm losing from having that shitty motor pattern is more than what I'm gaining from really pushing the limit. So even today, my technique isn't good enough where I'm like, oh, I'm done on the technique portion. I got all this.
Yeah. Boy, is it ever though.
No, not for the Olympic lifts. So only recently, like I've started to add back in a little bit more of kind of the more traditional lifts, more of squats, more other stuff. Because I don't have to put in like the same level of volume to continue to improve. Like now I could not snatch for a week, walk up to the bar. I can get warmed up. It looks about what, it looks pretty good. Before it was, you don't have those motor patterns as as precise. They're not the structure is not there in the way the neuron, whatever sciencey explanation you want to talk about. That hasn't been there. So if I go a week without snatching, I grab the bar. It's like, I've never fucking done this before.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have a lot of practice at them, you go a little bit of time without doing it, and you feel like you've never done it before. But then you, after a while, like that movement is so fresh in your head. It's so ingrained. You could, things like a back squat. I could not back squat for weeks. I jump in, it looks exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that movement is so locked in that, I don't need to do technically skill work.
Yeah.
And so only recently has it been like, okay, I don't have to push from a skill standpoint as much, instead of this day. This for me is kind of a time thing,
So how many years has it been since that focus started with that?
Man, that's been 8 years.
8 years.
Mm-hmm. And for me, to do a snatch or clean and jerk workout, that's going to take me a lot longer because I got to warm up more. I got to practice more. I got to do all those things a lot more to get ready for kind of the quality work. Whereas a back squat, I can grab a bar, start moving, I'm good. I can get a whole workout done within 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
A snatch workout's going to take me, hour 15 or longer. So only recently now I can be like, okay, this is a reasonable substitute as far as I don't have to come in and constantly work on this stuff to refine the movement. I can think of it like if you're going to take, kind of an off season or time off, like I could do a month of, the basic lifts, maintain that ability, then jump back in and be able to do it. But before I felt like if I wasn't hitting the lift like every other day, it was like, shit, I forgot how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Like the technique sucks. But now it's more second nature. Now it's the way that some of the other movements in strongman and powerlifting feel like.
Oh, let's take a break real quick. I got pissed. You guys are selecting Merrick for your telehealth platform needs. They have a couple different ways that they go about doing this. The first is through a self-selected experience. So there's a table talk panel, which is the full panel. That would be the panel that I personally get twice a year. That's checking everything. You name it, it's all there. The other panel is a checkup panel with a guided optimization. You're connected with a patient care coordinator, and the patient care coordinator will meet with you to determine what your needs are, to be able to help optimize your health or mitigate without judgment. So the discount code again is Table Talk Merrick Health for all your hormone optimization and performance needs. Today's episode is brought to you by Element, a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything that you need and nothing that you don't. In other words, no sugar, no artificial coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, and no BS. With Element, I love the watermelon. The watermelon tastes freaking awesome. I drank 1 pack every day, no matter what. People that train out here, it's sitting out here for them all the time. The boxes don't last very long. Right now, Element is offering Table Talk listeners a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 single-serving packages free with any Element order. Get yours at drinkelement.com/Table Talk. The deal is only available through the link in the description. The other thing is if you don't like it, you can just give it away to a salty friend and Element will give you a 100% refund. No risk, money back guarantee. Head over to drinkelement.com/Table Talk. Today's episode is brought to you by First Attachment. Are you looking for a supplement brand that truly understands hardworking athletes? Look no further than First Attachment. 1D's real world experience is what I would consider and they consider battle tested. I have known Justin Harris for pretty close to 2 decades. And if there's anybody that I trust with nutritional and supplement needs, it's Justin Harris. If you guys have followed me and have followed the podcast, you pretty much already know how I feel about the supplement industry. For me to get behind any brand, I have to trust the brand and I have to trust the person both. And I'm pretty sure you guys all know why. When it comes to creating formulas and putting products on the market, and there's nobody that I trust more than Justin Harris. While I love all of their products, I'd suggest that you check out the Field Rations and WTH first. Go to www.firstdetachment.com and use the code TableTalk10 to save 10% off each order. The link is in the description.